The platform was nothing more than weathered planks and splintered hope. Emma stood there with her single leather case, the one that held everything she owned, and felt the wind cut through her worn coat like it was testing her, seeing what she was truly made of. Around her, the frontier town of Coldwater stretched out in shades of brown and gray. Buildings that looked as though they had been thrown together in a hurry. Dirt streets that had not seen rain in months. And people who moved with the kind of tired urgency that came from fighting the land every single day. She had endured a long and arduous journey to reach this place. Trains that smelled of coal smoke and strangers, sleeping upright with her bag clutched to her chest, watching the landscape change from green to beige to something that looked as if the earth itself had given up trying. She had clung to a letter that promised her a new start. Dear Miss Vale, I am a rancher of some standing in Coldwater, Montana territory. I find myself in need of a wife, someone practical, hard-working, and unafraid of frontier life. Your letter suggested you possess these qualities. If you are willing to make the journey, I believe we could build something worthwhile together. Respectfully, J. Thornton. She had read it so many times the creases had worn soft. A rancher of some standing. That sounded solid. Permanent. After years of boarding houses and piecework that barely kept her fed, permanent sounded like something worth crossing half a country for. But Jack Thornton was walking away from her right now, his boots heavy on the platform, and he had not looked back once. Wait! Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. Mr. Thornton, please. He stopped. He did not turn around, just stopped with his shoulders set in a way that said he was doing her a courtesy by even that much. There has been a misunderstanding, Emma said, moving toward him with her case banging against her leg. The letter, you said. I said I needed someone practical and hardworking. Now he did turn, and his face was exactly as worn and unforgiving as everything else in this town. A man shaped by hard years. Eyes that looked at her like she was a problem he had not signed up for. I did not say I needed someone half-starved and past her prime. The words hit like fists. Past her prime. As if she did not already know. As if every boarding house mirror had not already shown her the gray in her hair, the lines around her eyes, the way her hands had begun to look like her mother's hands before her mother died tired and poor. I can work, she said, and hated how much it sounded like begging. I am stronger than I look. I have been sewing since I was a child. I can cook, I need someone who can help run a ranch. His voice was not even cruel, which somehow made it worse, just factual, disappointed. Someone who can handle cattle, mend fence, survive a Montana winter. Look at you. You would break. A man in a suit walked past them, glancing over with the kind of idle curiosity people had for public discomfort. The afternoon sun slanted hard across the platform, turning everything sharp-edged and unforgiving. I survived years in textile mills that would have broken most men, Emma said quietly. I survived losing everything I had in a factory fire. I survived crossing an ocean alone with nothing but the clothes on my back. I survived my husband drinking himself to death and leaving me with debts that took me years to pay off. So you will forgive me if I do not accept your assessment of what I can and cannot survive. Something flickered across Thornton's face. Not respect. She was not fool enough to think that. But maybe a moment of recognition that she was a person, and not just a disappointing package that had arrived by rail. I am sorry, he said, and it sounded as if he might even mean it. But this will not work. The stage runs back east twice a week. I will pay your fare back to where you came from. Philadelphia. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a wallet, counted out bills with the efficiency of a man conducting business. This should cover it and leave you enough for a few nights' lodging. He held out the money. Emma looked at it, then at his face, then at the town stretching out behind him. Cold Water. What a name. What a cold, honest name for a cold, honest place. She did not take the money. "Keep it," she said. "I did not come all this way to turn around and crawl back." Thornton's expression shifted to something between annoyance and concern. "Miss Vale, be reasonable. What exactly do you plan to do here?" "I do not know yet." It was the truth. She had no idea. But the thought of getting back on that train, of watching the landscape reverse itself while she returned to a city that had already chewed her up once. No, she would figure something out. "There is nothing here for a woman alone." He said it like a warning. "No boarding houses, no charity. People here work or they starve, and the work is not—" He gestured at her. "You will not last a week." "Then I will last 6 days." She picked up her case. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Thornton. I hope you find what you are looking for." She walked away before he could say anything else, before the fear clawing up her throat could show on her face. Her legs felt like water, but she kept them moving, one foot in front of the other, down the platform steps and onto the dirt street that ran like a scar through the center of town. Behind her, she heard Thornton mutter something that sounded like "stubborn fool," but his footsteps were going the other direction, so at least there was that. The street was rutted and hard. Her boots, good leather once but years ago, sent up small clouds of dust with each step. Buildings lined both sides. A general store, a saloon with doors that swung on hinges that needed oil, something that called itself a hotel, but looked as if it might fall down if you leaned on it wrong. Men in work clothes watched her pass with the blank stares of people too tired to be properly curious. A woman in a faded calico dress swept the porch of the general store, paused mid-stroke to look Emma over, then went back to sweeping with a little more vigor, as if she were trying to erase something. Emma made it to the end of the street before her courage ran out. She stopped beside a water trough that needed cleaning, set down her case, and let herself feel the full weight of how monumentally stupid this was. She had a few dollars sewn into the lining of her coat, a few dollars between her and whatever came after those dollars ran out. No job, no prospects, no roof except the sky, which was starting to turn the color of a bruise as evening came on. "You look lost." The voice came from her left, from the shadow of an alley between two buildings. Emma turned and saw a young woman, maybe 20, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. She wore trousers and a man's shirt, and her hair was cut short in a way that would have caused scandal back in Philadelphia. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Emma said, which was such an obvious lie that the girl actually laughed. "Sure you are." She pushed off the wall, came closer. Up close, her face was sun-dark and sharp-featured, pretty in a way that had nothing to do with softness. "Let me guess. Mail-order bride situation gone wrong. Something like that." "Thornton," Emma nodded. "Yeah, he is particular." The girl looked Emma up and down, but not the way Thornton had. This was assessment, not dismissal. "I am Riley. I work at the livery stable. You got a name?" "Emma Vale." "Well, Emma Vale, you planning to sleep in the street? Because the sheriff gets cranky about that kind of thing. I was hoping to find—" Emma stopped. What had she been hoping to find? Charity, kindness, a miracle. "I will figure something out." "Uh-huh." Riley glanced back at the street, then at Emma's case. "You sew?" "What?" "Your hands. I can see the needle marks. Old ones, you sew." Emma looked down at her fingers without meaning to. The calluses were permanent now, the tiny scars from years of pushing needles through thick fabric, the slight curve to her index finger from holding scissors. A seamstress's hands, a working woman's hands. "Yes," she said, "I sew. Mrs. Chen at the general store had a girl doing alterations, but she ran off last month to get married. Place has been drowning in mending work ever since. Riley jerked her head toward the store. Might be worth asking. Pay would not be much, but it is something. It was more than something. It was possibility, thin and uncertain. But there, Cynthia. Thank you, Emma said. Riley shrugged. Do not thank me yet. Mrs. Chen has standards, but you look like maybe you have worked hard enough to meet them. She started back toward the alley, then paused. And, Emma, do not let Thornton make you feel small. He has been looking for a wife for some time and keeps finding reasons to say no. Problem is not you. Problem is him. Then she was gone, disappeared into the shadows like she had been made of them. Emma picked up her case and walked back to the general store. The woman on the porch had finished sweeping and was standing there with the broom like she was considering using it as a weapon. Up close, she was Chinese, with eyes that looked as though they had seen every kind of nonsense humanity had to offer and had not been impressed by any of it. Mrs. Chen, Emma said. Who is asking? My name is Emma Vale. I am a seamstress. I heard you might need someone for alterations. Mrs. Chen looked at her for a long moment. You the one Thornton just turned away? Of course she knew. In a town this size, everyone probably knew already. News traveled fast when it was embarrassing. Yes, Emma said. No point lying. He is an idiot, Mrs. Chen said flatly. But that does not tell me if you can sew worth a damn. Come inside. The store was dim after the brightness outside, crowded with shelves that held everything from canned goods to ammunition to bolts of fabric that had seen better days. It smelled like coffee and leather and something sweet Emma could not identify. Mrs. Chen led her to a back corner where a pile of clothes sat on a scarred wooden table. Pants with split seams, shirts missing buttons, a dress that needed the hem taken up. The detritus of hard living. Fix that, Mrs. Chen said, pointing at a work shirt with a torn sleeve. I will watch. She produced a small sewing kit, needle, thread, scissors, and stood there with her arms crossed while Emma threaded the needle. Emma's hands knew what to do before her brain caught up. She had been doing this since she was a child in her mother's cramped apartment, since before she knew it would become the only skill that kept her alive. The tier was clean, easy to mend if you knew how to match the weave of the fabric. She worked quickly but carefully, her stitches small and even, reinforcing the seam so it would not tear again in the same place. When she finished, she handed it back. Mrs. Chen examined it in the light from the window, turning it over, checking the tension of the stitches. Then she grunted, which seemed to be approval. You are hired, she said. 20 cents a garment, more for complicated work. You can use that room. She pointed to a door half hidden behind a shelf. Used to be storage, but we cleared it out. There is a cot, a stove that works if you are patient with it, and a window that does not close all the way, so you will freeze come winter. Rent is $2 a week taken out of your pay. Emma did the math in her head. If she worked fast, she might be able to do enough garments to leave her enough to eat and maybe eventually save something. I will take it, she said. Of course you will. Mrs. Chen walked to the door, opened it. You got anywhere else to go? No, did not think so. The room was exactly as advertised, small, spare, with walls that had been whitewashed once, but had not seen paint in years. The cot looked as if it might collapse if you sat on it wrong, and the stove was missing a leg propped up on a brick. But there was a shelf, a hook for hanging clothes, and a window that looked out on the alley where Emma had met Riley. It was the most beautiful room she had ever seen. Thank you, Emma said, and meant it with everything she had. Do not thank me. Do good work. Mrs. Chen turned to leave, then stopped. And Emma, do not let this town grind you down. It will try. They all do. but you look like maybe you have got some gristle to you." Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft click. Emma set her case on the cot and sat down beside it. The springs creaked but held. Through the window she could see the sky going dark, the first stars starting to show. Somewhere in the distance a horse whinnied. The town was settling in for the night, and so was she. She had been rejected, dismissed, told she was not enough. But she had a room. She had work. She had a few dollars and a pile of mending and a window that did not close right. It was not much. It was everything. The days passed in a blur of thread and fabric and fingers that ached by evening. Emma worked from dawn until she could not see straight anymore, taking in pants and letting out waists, replacing buttons and patching tears, transforming the pile on Mrs. Chen's table into wearable clothes again. The work was familiar, meditative almost. She did not have to think, just let her hands do what they had always done. Mrs. Chen's customers were ranch hands mostly, men who worked hard and wore their clothes to death. They came in smelling of horses and dust, nodded at Emma like she was a piece of furniture, and left their torn shirts without much conversation. The women who came in, and there were not many, were more curious, their eyes taking in every detail of Emma's appearance, cataloging her like evidence. "You are the one Thornton did not want," one of them said. She was maybe 40, wearing a dress that had been nice once. Her name was Margaret something, wife of someone who owned land. "I suppose I am," Emma said, threading a needle. "Cannot say I blame him." Margaret's voice was not unkind, just stating facts. A man needs a strong wife out here, someone who can help build something. Emma did not look up from her work. "I have been building things my whole life. They just don't look like ranches." Margaret watched her work for a moment. "Mrs. Chen says you are fast. I have had practice." "Well," Margaret set a skirt on the table, one with a ruined hem. "Let us see what you can do with this." Emma did the hem, made it look as if it had never been damaged. When Margaret came to pick it up, she examined it in the light, looking for flaws. "It is good work," she admitted. "Thank you. Still do not think you will make it through winter, though. This place has a way of finding your weak spots." After she left, Mrs. Chen came over with a cup of tea that tasted as if it were made from something that grew behind the store. "Do not listen to her. Margaret has been bitter since her husband started drinking more than working. She wants everyone to be as miserable as she is." "I do not mind," Emma said, and it was true. She had heard worse, had worse said to her face and behind her back. Words only cut if you give them edges. "Good." Mrs. Chen sipped her tea. "Because this town is going to test you. They test everyone, especially women who show up alone. I have been tested before. I believe you." Mrs. Chen looked at her with those sharp eyes. "But out here, the tests are different. Harder. This land does not care about your feelings or your history. It just takes and takes until you are empty or you are strong enough to take something back." "Which one are you?" Emma asked. Which one are you? Mrs. Chen smiled, showing teeth. "What do you think?" That night, Emma lay on her cot, listening to the town settle. Voices from the saloon, horses moving in the livery stable, the wind testing the boards of the building like it was looking for a way in. Her room was cold. It was always cold, but she had a blanket Mrs. Chen had grudgingly provided, and she wrapped herself in it like armor. She thought about Thornton's face when he had looked at her, the disappointment, the assessment, the quick calculation that had found her wanting, past her prime, too small, too weak. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was a mistake, a last desperate grasp at something that was never meant for her. Maybe she should have taken his money and gone back to Philadelphia, back to boarding houses and piecework, and the slow, grinding poverty she had known her whole life. But then she thought about the pile of mending she had finished that day. Garments done well, done right. Money earned. Proof that her hands still worked, that she still had value, that she could build something even if it was just a small life in a hard place. She fell asleep thinking about that, about building. She did not know someone was watching her window from the street below. She did not know that a man on a tall horse had paused there, looking up at the light from her stove, at the shadow moving behind the glass. Caleb Boone sat on his horse and watched the woman's silhouette against the window. He had seen the whole thing at the train platform, had been picking up supplies when Thornton rejected her, had watched her walk away with her back straight and her case heavy, and something in her bearing that had made him think of a soldier who had lost the battle but was not done with the war. He had asked around, found out she was staying above the general store, doing mending for Mrs. Chen. Found out her name was Emma Vale, and she had come from back east, expecting to marry a man who had taken one look and decided she was not worth the trouble. Thornton was an idiot. But then, Thornton had always been an idiot. The light in her window went out. Caleb turned his horse and rode back toward his cabin, thinking about things he had no business thinking about women who did not quit when quitting would have been easier, about eyes that had seen too much but kept looking anyway, about what it meant to be dismissed and still stand up. The night was cold and clear, stars like holes punched in black canvas. His cabin was tucked up against the foothills, where the land started to climb toward mountains. He had built it himself, made it solid and tight, a place that would stand against anything Montana could throw at it. He had built it big enough for more than one person. That had been the plan anyway, before Sarah had gotten sick. Before the fever that had taken her so fast, he had barely had time to understand she was dying. Before he had buried her in the meadow behind the cabin and spent years turning into someone who did not need anyone, who could not afford to need anyone. But plans changed. They always did. He put his horse in the small barn, gave it feed and water, ran his hands over its flanks to check for injuries. The animal leaned into his touch, trusting. Caleb had always been better with animals than people. Animals did not lie, did not pretend, did not look at you with expectations you could not meet. Inside the cabin was dark and cold. He lit a lamp, got a fire going in the stove, heated water for coffee that he drank standing at the window, looking out at nothing. He thought about the woman in town, Emma Vale, the way she had stood on that platform with everything falling apart around her and still managed to keep her spine straight. He thought about offering her something, work maybe. There was always work on a ranch. He could pay Miss Kijien to give her more hours, make sure she had enough to get through winter. But that would be charity. And something told him Emma Vale was not the kind of woman who accepted charity. Pride had a way of keeping people poor, but it also kept them whole. There was a difference between helping someone and breaking them with kindness they could not repay. He would figure something out. Or he would not. Maybe it was not his business. Maybe he should leave her alone. Let her build whatever life she was going to build, without interference from a man she had never met. But even as he thought it, he knew he would not. There was something about her, something that reminded him of what it felt like to want something so badly you would cross a country for it. Risk everything. Put yourself in front of the world and say, "Here I am. Give me your worst." He respected that. More than respected it. He finished his coffee, banked the fire, and went to bed, thinking about a woman who had been told she was not enough and had decided the person doing the telling was wrong. Soon after, the weather changed. Emma woke to the sound of wind that was not like any wind she had heard before. It screamed around the building, found every crack and gap, turned her small room into a place that felt as if it might fly apart. The temperature had dropped overnight, and when she breathed, she could see the fog of it. She got dressed in layers, everything she owned basically, and went downstairs to find Miebu Qianjian standing by the stove with a look on her face that might have been concern if Miss Chen did concern. "Storm coming?" she said. "Bad one. You will want to stay inside." Through the window, Emma could see the sky had turned the color of old iron. The wind was picking up dust and debris, sending it spinning down the street like the town was trying to shake itself loose from the earth. "I have deliveries," Emma said. "They can wait." Mrs. Chen's voice had iron in it. "You go out in this, you will freeze. This is not Philadelphia weather. This is the kind of storm that kills people who do not respect it." Emma looked at the pile of finished work, at the list of people expecting their clothes. She thought about losing customers, about the fragile reputation she was building. Then she looked at the window again, at the way the whole building was starting to shake, and decided Mrs. Chen was probably right. The storm hit. It came like a wall, like the sky had turned solid and decided to crush everything beneath it. Snow so thick, Emma could not see across the street. Wind that howled and screamed and sounded as if it were trying to tear the world down to bare foundations. The temperature dropped so fast, the window frosted over, turned into a sheet of white that blocked out whatever passed for daylight. Mrs. Chen closed the store, locked the door, and they spent the time huddled by the stove while the building groaned around them. "How long does this last?" Emma asked. "Could be hours. Could be days." Mrs. Chen was knitting something, her needles clicking with mechanical precision. "Just have to wait it out. And if it is days, then it is ours." Emma thought about her room upstairs, about the window that did not close right, about how cold it was going to get. She thought about the few dollars she had come with, now even less after rent and food, and how far that would go if she could not work. "Stop thinking so loud," Mrs. Chen said, without looking up from her knitting. "You will give yourself lines. I am just worrying." "I know. I can hear it from here." The needles kept clicking. "You will be fine. You have got a roof. You have got heat. You have got work waiting for you when this blows over. That is more than a lot of people have." It was true, but truth did not make the wind sound less like the end of the world. The storm lasted. 2 days of being trapped inside while the snow piled up against the door, while the wind screamed itself hoarse, while the temperature dropped so low that water left in a cup overnight froze solid. Emma worked by lamplight, finishing pieces she had already finished, rechecking seams that did not need checking. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from wandering to dark places. On the second night, something changed in the wind. It stopped screaming and started moaning, a lower sound, almost mournful. Mrs. Chen looked up from her knitting and tilted her head like she was listening to a language Emma did not speak. "It is dying," she said. "Should be clear by morning." She was right. When Emma woke, the silence was so complete it felt as if the world had ended, and she had somehow missed it. She went to the window and looked out at a town transformed. Snow everywhere, piled high against buildings, covering the street in white that looked almost blue in the early light. The sky was clear, painfully bright, the kind of blue that hurt to look at. And the cold was something alive. Emma went downstairs to find Mrs. Chen already up, already opening the store, already moving like nothing had happened. "You will need to dig out the door," Mrs. Chen said, handing her a shovel. "Customers are going to be impatient." Emma dug. Her muscles screamed. Her breath came in gasps. Her fingers went numb, even through gloves Mrs. Chen had provided. But she dug, and eventually there was a path, and eventually people started coming. They came for their mending, for supplies, for the basic necessities of continuing to exist. They moved carefully through snow that came up to their knees, their faces red with cold, their eyes watering from the wind that was still sharp, even though the storm had passed. Riley came in, stomping snow off her boots. "You made it," she said to Emma, like there had been some question. Was there doubt? "First winter storm kills about half the newcomers." Riley said it casually, like she was talking about weather, not death. Usually the ones who do not listen when people tell them to stay inside. I stayed inside. Smart. Riley looked at the pile of finished mending. "You staying busy?" "Busy enough." "Good." Riley hesitated, which seemed unusual for her. "Look, there is something you should know. People are talking." "People always talk. Not like this." Riley glanced at Mrs. Chen, who was helping a customer, then back to Emma. "You are a woman alone, living in town, working, not starving. Some folks do not like it." "Do not like what?" "That you do not need them. That you did not crawl back to wherever you came from when Thornton rejected you. That you are making it work without a man." Riley shrugged. "It bothers them. That sounds like their problem." "It is until they make it your problem." Riley moved closer, lowered her voice. "Margaret Thornton, Jack Thornton's sister-in-law. She has been saying things about how it is improper for you to be here. How Mrs. Chen should not be encouraging it. How women alone attract the wrong kind of attention." "What kind of attention?" "The kind that makes men think they can take liberties." Riley's face was serious. "Now, I am just saying, watch yourself. This town can turn fast, especially against women who do not fit the way they are supposed to fit." After Riley left, Emma stood there with a shirt she was supposed to be hemming and thought about fitting. About the shapes people expected you to take, the molds they tried to press you into. She had spent her whole life not fitting. Too poor, too foreign, too unmarried, too old, too weak, too much, not enough. The shirt needed a hem. She hemmed it. That night she heard the footsteps. She was in her room, almost asleep, when the sound brought her back. Someone walking below her window. Slow steps, deliberate, like they were measuring something. She lay still, listening. The steps stopped. Started again. Stopped. Then a voice, low and male and slurred with drink. "I know you are up there." Emma's heart kicked against her ribs. "I seen you, working all day like you are better than everyone, but you are not. You are just a woman alone, and women alone need help, do not they? Need protection." The door rattled. Someone testing it, seeing if it was locked. It was locked. "You let me in." "I will protect you real good." Emma got up, moving quietly, and found the heaviest thing in her room, the iron she used for pressing. She held it and waited. The door rattled again, harder this time. Then Mrs. Chen's voice cut through the night like a blade. "You touch that door again, I will shoot you where you stand." Silence. "I do not make idle threats, Danny. You know that. Now get off my property before I decide the sheriff does not need to know about this." Footsteps, faster now, moving away. The sound of someone stumbling, cursing, fading into distance. Emma stood there with the iron in her hand, shaking. A knock on her door, gentle this time. "Emma, you all right?" She opened it to find Mrs. Chen standing there, with a shotgun in her hands, and an expression that suggested she would have used it without hesitation. "I am fine," Emma said. "You are not, but you will be." Mrs. Chen looked at the iron Emma was holding, nodded. "Good instinct, but next time yell. I am a light sleeper." "Who is that?" "Danny Reeves, ranch hand, drunk, thinks he is entitled to things he is not." Mrs. Chen's grip on the shotgun was steady. "He will not come back, but there might be others. Word has gotten around that you are here, and some men take that as an invitation. An invitation to what? To try their luck. To see if you are desperate enough to accept their help in exchange for— Mrs. Chen paused. Services rendered. The floor felt unsteady under Emma's feet. I am not desperate. I know, but they do not. All they see is a woman alone, and in their minds that equals available. Mrs. Chen looked at her hard. You need to be careful. Do not go out alone at night. Do not accept rides from men you do not know. Do not let anyone corner you somewhere private. This is ridiculous. This is reality. You wanted to stay in cold water. This is part of the cost. Mrs. Chen turned to leave, then stopped. For what it is worth, I am glad you stayed. You do good work, and you have got more spine than half the people in this town. But spine does not stop bullets, or men who think they are owed something. So be smart. After she left, Emma locked the door and went back to her cot. She did not sleep. She lay there, listening to every sound, the iron within reach, and thought about what Riley had said. This town can turn fast. She was starting to understand what that meant. Morning came cold and clear. Emma went downstairs to find the store already open. Mrs. Chen behind the counter like nothing had happened. There was no mention of the previous night, no discussion of Danny Reeves or shotguns or doors that rattled in the dark. Just work. Just the pile of mending that never seemed to get smaller. Emma was fixing a pair of work pants. The third pair this week with the same damn tear in the same damn place when the door opened and someone new walked in. Not new to the world, but new to Emma. He was tall, the kind of tall that had to duck slightly to get through door frames, a face that looked as if it had been carved out of the same rock as the mountains in the distance. Dark hair starting to gray at the temples, eyes that were some shade between green and gray, and did not seem to miss much. He wore work clothes like everyone else, but they fit better. Moved with him, like they had been made for his body specifically. He walked to the counter and nodded at Mrs. Chen. "Morning," he called her. Mrs. Chen's voice had shifted, warmed about half a degree. "What brings you to town?" "Supplies and this." He set a coat on the counter, canvas and sheepskin. Good quality, but with a torn seam under the arm. "Caught it on a fence post. Think it can be saved?" Mrs. Chen looked at it, then at Emma. "Ask her. She is the seamstress." The man turned to Emma. Up close, his eyes were more green than gray. They looked at her the way they would probably look at anything. Direct. Assessing. No judgment layered in. Just taking in information. "Can you fix it?" he asked. Emma took the coat, examined the tear. It was clean, recent, the kind of thing that happened when you were working and not paying attention. Easy to fix if you knew what you were doing. "Yes," she said. "It will take a day." "That is fine. I will be back tomorrow." He paused. "You are the one Thornton did not want." It was not a question, but Emma answered anyway. "I am. His loss." Caleb said it simply, like he was commenting on the weather. Then he nodded to Mrs. Chen and walked out, ducking through the doorframe again. Emma stood there with his coat in her hands, not sure what had just happened. "That is Caleb Boone," Mrs. Chen said. "He has got a ranch up in the foothills, keeps to himself mostly. He comes all the way to town for supplies. He comes for other reasons too, but supplies is the excuse he uses." Mrs. Chen went back to her inventory like the conversation was over. Emma looked at the coat. Quality materials, well made, cared for, the kind of thing someone bought when they wanted it to last. She found her needle and thread and got to work reinforcing the tear, making it stronger than it had been before. She did not know why, but she wanted this repair to be perfect. Caleb came back the next day, just like he said he would. Emma had the coat ready, the repair invisible unless you knew where to look. She had stayed up late working on it by lamplight, her fingers moving through the familiar motions, while her mind wandered to places it had no business going. She kept thinking about the way he had looked at her, not through her, not past her, but at her, like she was a person worth seeing. He walked in, snow still clinging to his boots. The store was busy, ranch hands picking up supplies, a couple of women examining fabric with the kind of careful attention that meant they were counting pennies. Caleb moved through them like water, not pushy, but somehow creating space just by existing. "It is done," Emma said when he reached the counter. She held up the coat, showed him the repair. "I reinforced the whole seam. It will not tear there again." He took it, examined her work with the same careful attention the women were giving the fabric. His hands were big, scarred across the knuckles, the hands of someone who worked hard and did not complain about it. "Good work," he said. "What do I owe you?" 50 cents. He pulled out $1, set it on the counter. "Keep the change. That is too much." "It is what it is worth." He met her eyes. "You did it right. That matters." Before Emma could argue, he turned and was walking toward the door. Then he paused, looked back. "You settling in all right?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. "I am managing. That is not what I asked." Around them, the store had gone quieter, not silent. People were still talking, still moving. But there was a tension now, the kind of sideways listening that happened when something interesting was unfolding. "I am fine," Emma said, keeping her voice steady. "Thank you for asking." Caleb nodded like he had expected that answer, but had not necessarily believed it. "You need anything? Mrs. Chen knows knows where to find me." Then he was gone out into the cold morning, leaving Emma standing there with $1 in her hand, and the feeling that something had shifted without her permission. Mrs. Chen materialized at her elbow. "He likes you. He does not know me. Does not matter. Caleb has instincts about people, always has." Mrs. Chen took the $1, made change, handed Emma her 50 cents. "You should keep the whole thing." He meant it as a gesture. "I do not need gestures. Maybe not. But you might need friends." Mrs. Chen looked toward the door where Caleb had disappeared. And there are worse friends to have than Caleb Boone. Over the next days, Emma fell into something that almost resembled a routine. Wake before dawn, work until her eyes blurred, fall into bed too tired to think about anything except the next day's pile. The mending kept coming. Pants and shirts and dresses and coats, an endless stream of fabric that needed fixing. Her fingers developed new calluses on top of old ones. Her back ached from hunching over her work, but her coin purse got heavier, and that mattered more than comfort. She learned the rhythms of the town, the ranch hands who came in on Saturdays smelling of whiskey and regret, the families who showed up after church on Sundays, the women whispering to each other while their husbands examined tools they could not afford, the quiet weekday mornings when the store was empty except for Mrs. Chen's humming and the tick of the clock on the wall. She learned which customers paid on time and which ones made excuses, which ones treated her like a person and which ones looked through her like she was furniture. Danny Reeves came in once, would not meet her eyes, paid for his mending, and left without a word. The shame on his face was almost worth the fear he had caused. Almost. Riley stopped by most afternoons, always with some excuse. Needed buttons, had a torn bridle, wanted to know if Emma could sew leather. Really, she just wanted to talk, and Emma found she did not mind the company. "You hear about the Connolly place?" Riley asked one day, perched on the counter like she owned it. "No, bank took it. 3rd ranch this month." Riley swung her legs, her boots thumping against the wood. "Bad winter, bad prices, bad luck. People are scared of losing everything. That is all anyone has got out here. Their land, their animals, their pride. Take that away, and what is left? Riley looked at her. You ever been scared like that? Like everything you built could disappear? Emma thought about the factory fire that had taken her job and her home in one afternoon. About watching everything she owned turn to smoke while she stood in the street with nothing but the clothes she was wearing. Yes, she said, I have been scared like that. What did you do? Started it over. What else could I do? Riley nodded like that was the answer she had expected. That is what most people do not understand about you. They think you are weak because you are small, because you are a woman, because you are alone. But starting over after you have lost everything, that takes something most of them do not have. It takes not having a choice, maybe. But you could have crawled back to Philadelphia with Thornton's money, could have given up. You did not. Riley jumped down from the counter. That is why some people do not like you. You make them look at their own excuses. After Riley left, Emma sat with that thought. She had never considered herself brave. Brave was for people who had options and chose the hard one. She had just been surviving, doing what needed doing because the alternative was unthinkable. But maybe that was its own kind of courage. The cold deepened as winter settled in. Emma woke one morning to find frost patterns on her window, so thick they looked like lace, beautiful and useless, and in the way of seeing anything real. She scraped a hole with her fingernail, peered out at a town locked in ice. Mrs. Chen was already downstairs feeding the stove. Going to be a hard one today, she said. Temperature dropped low last night. Water barrels frozen solid. Emma pulled her coat tighter. The cold out here was not like Philadelphia cold. That had been damp and miserable, but manageable. This was sharp, clean, the kind of cold that could kill you if you were not careful. The kind that found every gap in your defenses and exploited it. We will manage, Mrs. Chen said, seeing Emma's expression. We always do. But around noon, the door opened, and Margaret Thornton walked in, with two other women flanking her like soldiers. Emma recognized one of them, Sarah Fletcher, the minister's wife, always smiling in that way that did not reach her eyes. The other was younger, maybe 30, with a face that looked as if it had forgotten how to relax. They moved through the store with purpose, examining things without really looking at them, working their way toward the back, where Emma sat with her mending. Margaret stopped in front of her table. Miss Vale, Mrs. Thornton. Emma did not stand, did not stop working. We need to have a conversation. I am listening. Margaret glanced at her companions, drawing strength from their presence. It has come to our attention that your living situation here is irregular. I rent a room and work for my keep. Nothing irregular about that. A woman alone, living above a store, working without proper supervision. Margaret's voice had that thin quality of someone who had rehearsed this. It sets a bad example. For whom? For the younger women in town, for the moral fabric of this community. Sarah Fletcher stepped forward, her smile fixed in place. We are concerned about appearances, Miss Vale. Surely you understand. Emma set down her needle, looked at the three women standing there in their proper dresses with their proper lives. No, I do not understand. Explain it to me. Your presence here attracts the wrong kind of attention, the younger woman said. Her voice shook slightly. Men talk. They say things about what a woman alone might be willing to do for protection, for money, for what? Say it. Emma's voice was quiet, but it cut. You came here to tell me something, so tell me. Margaret's face flushed. There are rumors about you and various men in town, about what you might be doing to supplement your income. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Mrs. Chen appeared from somewhere behind them, moving silently for someone her age. That is enough, Mrs. Chen said. Surely you can see. I can see three women with too much time and too little sense standing in my store making accusations they cannot back up. Mrs. Chen's voice could have frozen water. Emma works. She keeps to herself. She causes no trouble. If men talk, that is their failing, not hers. The town council is concerned, Margaret said, shifting tactics. They are considering ordinances about unattached women living within town limits for everyone's protection. Whose protection? Emma stood now, her hands steady even though something was shaking inside her chest. Mine? Because I don't recall asking for protection. Or is this about protecting the town from women who do not need permission to exist? This is not about independence, Sarah Fletcher said, her smile finally slipping. It is about propriety, about maintaining standards. Standards? Emma tasted the word. I work long hours a day. I pay my rent. I bother no one. But because I do not have a husband, I am somehow a threat to your standards. You do not understand how things work here, Margaret said. This is not the city. We have rules, structure. Women cannot just… Cannot what? Survive without a man's approval. Emma's voice was rising now, all the careful control she had been maintaining starting to crack. I have survived things you cannot imagine. I have worked jobs that would break you in a week. I have earned every penny I have ever had, and I do not owe you, or this town, or anyone else, an explanation for how I choose to live. The younger woman took a step back, but Margaret held her ground. If you will not leave voluntarily, we will have to take other measures. The council meets next week. They will vote on the ordinance, and when it passes, you will have no choice but to go. Margaret's voice had turned cold, certain. We are trying to give you a chance to leave with your dignity intact. My dignity is intact. It is your humanity I am questioning. Mrs. Chen moved between them. Get out of my store. Mrs. Chen, out. Now. Before I forget I'm a businesswoman. And remember, I have got a shotgun under this counter. They left, but slowly, making sure everyone saw they were choosing to go rather than being forced. The door closed behind them with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Emma sat back down. Her hands were shaking now, the tremor she had been suppressing making the needle dance. They are going to make this hard for you, Mrs. Chen said quietly. I know. The council will listen to Margaret. Her husband owns half the businesses in town. If she pushes for this ordinance, then they will pass it. Emma picked up the needle, forced her hands to steady, and started sewing again. Small stitches, even tension, the familiar rhythm that had carried her through every crisis she had ever faced. But I am not leaving. Mrs. Chen looked at her for a long moment. You are stubborn. That will either save you or kill you. I have survived this long on stubborn. Fair enough. Mrs. Chen went back to the counter, but her hand stayed near where Emma knew the shotgun lived. That night, Emma could not sleep. She lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, thinking about town councils and ordinances and the 1,000 small ways people found to push out anyone who did not fit their idea of normal. She had seen it before in Philadelphia. The way neighborhoods turned against immigrants. The way bosses found reasons to fire women who asked for fair wages. The way power always protected itself by crushing anyone who questioned it. But she had never fought back before. Never had the energy or the resources or the simple, stubborn conviction that she had a right to exist on her own terms. Maybe it was time to start. She was still awake when she heard the horse outside. Hoofbeats on frozen ground, stopping below her window. Then footsteps and a knock on the door downstairs. Emma got up, grabbed her coat and the iron she kept by the bed, and crept to the top of the stairs. Below, she could hear Mrs. Chen moving, heard the distinctive sound of the shotgun being cocked. Who is there? Mrs. Chen called through the door. Caleb Boone, I need to talk to Emma Vale. A pause. Then the sound of locks being undone. Emma came down the stairs slowly. Mrs. Chen stood at the door with the shotgun lowered but not put away. And Caleb filled the doorframe, his hat in his hands. It is the middle of the night, Mrs. Chen said. I know, I'm sorry, but I heard about what happened today and He stopped when he saw Emma on the stairs. I need to talk to you. About what? About an option you might not have considered. Mrs. Chen looked between them, then sighed. I will make coffee. You two talk in the store. Door stays open. She disappeared into the back, leaving Emma and Caleb standing in the dim lamplight. You did not have to come all this way, Emma said. Yeah, I did. Caleb turned his hat in his hands, a nervous gesture that seemed at odds with his size. I heard Margaret Thornton and her friends paid you a visit. Heard what they said. News travels fast. It is a small town. And what they are planning, this ordinance, it is not right. A lot of things are not right. Emma came down the last few stairs, stood close enough to see the concern on his face. But I do not see how that is your problem. Maybe it is not, but I am making it my problem anyway. He took a breath. There is a way around their ordinance. What way? Get married. The words landed like stones in still water. Emma stared at him. Excuse me? If you are married, you are not an unattached woman. The ordinance cannot touch you. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing crop rotation. I know it is not. I mean, we barely know each other, but it would be practical. A solution. A solution. Emma's voice was flat. You are proposing marriage as a practical solution. I am proposing marriage as a way to keep you from being forced out of town by people who have got no right to force you anywhere. Caleb's jaw tightened. I have got land. A cabin. It is remote, but it is solid. You could live there. Keep working if you want it or not. Your choice. I would not. He stopped. Started again. I would not expect anything from you. It would be an arrangement, partnership, not a real marriage. Not unless you wanted it to be. His eyes met hers, steady and honest. I am not trying to trap you. I am trying to help. Mrs. Chen appeared with coffee, set down 3 cups, and retreated back into the shadows without a word. Emma picked up a cup, wrapped her hands around it, felt the heat seep into her frozen fingers. Her mind was racing, trying to find the angle, the hidden cost, the thing he was not saying. Why? She asked. Why would you do this? Caleb was quiet for a moment. My wife died some years ago. Sarah. Fever took her fast. And after she was gone, I kept thinking about building a life, having someone in the cabin besides me and my thoughts. But it never felt right with anyone else. He looked down at his coffee. Then I saw you at the train platform, saw Thornton turn you away, saw you stand there with everything falling apart, and decide to stay anyway. And I thought, he paused, I thought that is someone who knows what it means to choose a hard thing and stick with it. That is not a reason to marry someone, no, but it is a reason to respect someone, to want to help them if you can. He set down his cup. Look, I am not asking you to love me. I am not asking you to pretend this is something it is not. I am just offering you a way out of a corner you did not ask to be backed into. Emma looked at him, really looked, at the lines around his eyes that came from squinting into sun and wind, at the way he held himself, straight but not rigid, at the honesty in his face that was either genuine or the best act she had ever seen. I need to think about it, she said. Fair enough. Caleb stood, put his hat back on. I will be in town tomorrow. If you decide yes, tell Mrs. Chen. She knows where to find me. He was halfway to the door when Emma spoke again. Why did you not send for a mail-order bride yourself if you wanted someone in your cabin? Caleb turned back. Because I tried that once. She showed up, took one look at how remote the place was, and left on the next stage. Said she did not sign up to live in the middle of nowhere with a man she did not know. He smiled, but it was sad. She was right to leave. It was not fair to ask her to give up everything for a stranger's dream. But you? I am offering you an alternative to being run out of town by people who think they own the definition of acceptable. His hand was on the door. There is a difference. Then he was gone out into the frozen night, leaving Emma standing there with cold coffee and a choice she never wanted to make. Mrs. Chen emerged from the shadows. You going to do it? I do not know. He is a good man. Quiet, but good. Treats his animals well. Pays his debts. Does not cause trouble. Mrs. Chen sat down, picked up the coffee Caleb had not finished. You could do worse. I could also stay here, fight the ordinance, make them force me out. You could. Might even win. Margaret has got power, but she is not invincible. Mrs. Chen looked at her. But what kind of life would you have after? Even if you won, they would make you pay for it every day. Small cruelties, forgotten orders, prices that suddenly go up. You would survive, but you would be surviving against them instead of just surviving. And if I marry Caleb, what then? Then you would be surviving with someone instead of against everyone. Different kind of hard, maybe, but at least you would not be alone in it. Emma went back upstairs, back to her cold room, and her cot that creaked. She lay there, watching frost patterns grow on her window, and thought about choices. Marriage to a stranger who at least seemed honest about what he wanted, or fighting a town that had already decided she did not belong. Neither option was good, but one of them meant she got to stay on her own terms instead of theirs. She thought about Caleb's face when he talked about his wife, the grief that was still there, worn smooth like a river stone, but present. He was not offering her love, was not even offering her a real marriage, just partnership, shelter, a way to exist without constantly defending her right to do so. It was practical, transactional almost. And maybe that was exactly what she needed. Dawn came gray and cold. Emma got up, got dressed, went downstairs to find Mrs. Chen already at work. Tell him yes, Emma said. Mrs. Chen did not look surprised. You sure? No. But I am doing it anyway. That is probably the smartest thing you have said since you got here. Mrs. Chen went to her desk, pulled out paper and a pen. I will send word. He will want to do it fast before the council meets. How fast? End of the week, probably. That give you enough time to change your mind? Emma thought about that. About having time to second guess, to panic, to talk herself out of a decision that felt both absolutely wrong and somehow inevitable. No, she said, but do it anyway. The next days passed in a blur of work and worry, and strange, disconnected moments, where Emma would forget what was coming, and then remember with a jolt that felt like falling. She was getting married to a man she had spoken to exactly 3 times to escape an ordinance designed to push her out of a town she had been in for less than 2 months. It was insane. It was desperate. It was the most practical thing she could do, given the circumstances. Riley came by on the second day, having somehow already heard. You are marrying Caleb Boone, she said. Not quite a question. Apparently you know his place is an hour's ride from town, middle of nowhere. You will be isolated out there. I know. You know he barely talks, that he has been alone so long, he might have forgotten how to live with another person. I know that too. Riley studied her. You scared? Terrified. Good. That means you are thinking clearly. Riley sat on the counter, her usual perch. For what it is worth, I think you are doing the right thing. Not the easy thing, but the right thing. What is the difference? The easy thing would be leaving, going back to Philadelphia or somewhere else, starting over again. You are good at starting over. You have done it before. Riley kicked her heels against the counter. The right thing is staying, building something here, even if it is hard, even if it is scary. I am marrying a stranger to avoid a town ordinance. That is not brave. That is survival. Sometimes they are the same thing. The day before the wedding, if you could call it that, Emma packed her belongings into the same leather case she had arrived with. It took less time than she had expected. Clothes, sewing supplies, the few personal items that had survived years of moving. Everything she owned fit into one bag, which was either depressing or liberating, depending on how she looked at it. Mrs. Chen watched from the doorway. You can come back. If it does not work out, there is always work here. Thank you. Do not thank me. You earned it. Mrs. Chen handed her an envelope. Your wages, every penny you made, minus rent and supplies. Emma opened it, counted. More than she had expected. Almost $30. This is too much. It is what you earned. Do not argue. Mrs. Chen looked away out the window at the town settling in for evening. I'm going to miss having you around. Place will not be the same without you cursing its stubborn buttons. I do not curse. You do, just quietly. I heard you. Mrs. Chen turned back, and her eyes were suspiciously bright. You are a good worker, Emma. A good person. Caleb is lucky to have you. I hope he thinks so. That night, Emma lay in her room above the general store for the last time. Tomorrow, she would be married. Tomorrow, she would ride out to a cabin in the foothills with a man she barely knew. Tomorrow, her life would change in ways she could not predict. She should have been terrified, but mostly she just felt tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of proving herself. Tired of being measured against standards she had never agreed to. Maybe that was what marriage to Caleb offered. Not love, not even companionship, but just a rest, a place to exist without constantly defending her right to do so. She could live with that. She had to. The ceremony took place in the sheriff's office, because the minister had made it clear he would not perform a marriage for a woman of questionable character without a proper courtship period. Sheriff Hayes did not seem to care about courtship periods or character. He cared about the $5 fee and getting back to his lunch. Emma stood in her best dress, which was not saying much, next to Caleb, who had cleaned up but still looked like a man who would rather be anywhere else. Mrs. Chen was there as witness along with Riley, who had shown up uninvited, but was not leaving. You got the license? Hayes asked, his mouth full of bread and cheese. Caleb handed it over. Hayes glanced at it, grunted, set it on his desk next to his lunch. Right then, you, Caleb Boone, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife. I do. And you? Hayes squinted at the paper. Emma Vale, you take this man as your lawfully wedded husband. The room felt smaller than it was. Emma could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders like a physical thing. Last chance to back out. Last chance to say no, to walk away, to choose uncertainty over this strange, arranged certainty. I do, she said. Good enough. You are married. That will be $5. Caleb paid. Hayes stamped the license, handed it back, and returned to his lunch like he had just completed the most boring transaction of his day, which, to be fair, he probably had. Congratulations, Mrs. Chen said dryly. Very romantic. Romance was not the point, Caleb said, but there was something in his voice that might have been embarrassment. Riley grabbed Emma's hand, squeezed it. You all right? Ask me later. Fair enough. Outside, the day was cold and bright, the kind of weather that made everything look sharp and unforgiving. Caleb's horse was tied to the post, a big bay gelding that looked at Emma with what she chose to interpret as skepticism. Behind it was a wagon loaded with supplies and her single leather case. I figured we would take the wagon, Caleb said. Easier than you riding behind me for an hour. I do not know how to ride. Even better then. He helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hand solid under her elbow, then climbed up beside her. The seat was narrow enough that their shoulders touched, Mrs. Chen approached, handed Emma a wrapped bundle. "Food. You will need it. Thank you for everything. Do not get sentimental. I will see you when you come to town for supplies." But Mrs. Chen's eyes were bright again, and she turned away quickly. Riley stood on the boardwalk, arms crossed. "You take care of her, Boone. She is tougher than she looks, but that does not mean she should have to prove it every day." "I know," Caleb said quietly. Then he snapped the reins, and the wagon lurched forward, and Emma was leaving Coldwater as a married woman to a man she had spoken to maybe a dozen times total. The road out of town was rutted and frozen, the wagon bouncing over ice that had formed in the wheel tracks. They passed the last buildings, past the point where the town ended and the wilderness began. And suddenly, there was nothing but land stretching out in all directions. Mountains in the distance, their peaks white against blue sky, rolling hills covered in brown grass and scattered patches of snow, trees that looked black against the brightness. And silence, the kind of silence Emma had never experienced in her life, broken only by the creak of the wagon and the thud of the horse's hooves. "It is another hour," Caleb said after they had been riding for some time. "Road gets rougher once we leave the main trail." "All right. You warm enough?" She was freezing, but she said, "I am fine." Caleb glanced at her, then reached behind the seat and pulled out a thick blanket. "Put this over your legs. Temperature drops fast out here once the sun starts going down." Emma took the blanket, wrapped it around herself. It smelled like horse and wood smoke, and something else she could not identify. The warmth was immediate, and she had to fight not to show how much she had needed it. They rode in silence for a while. The main road branched off, became a trail that was barely more than 2 lines worn into the grass. The wagon bounced harder now, jolting Emma's teeth with each rut. She gripped the edge of the seat and tried not to think about how far they were from anything resembling civilization. "You scared?" Caleb asked suddenly. The question was so direct it caught her off guard. "Should I be?" "No, but you might be anyway." He kept his eyes on the trail. I know you did not plan on any of this, coming all this way just to end up married to a stranger living in the middle of nowhere." "No, I planned on marrying a different stranger in the middle of nowhere. This is just a variation." He actually smiled at that. Small and quick. "Fair point. Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why did you really offer to marry me? And do not say it was just to help. People do not upend their entire lives just to help someone they barely know." Caleb was quiet for long enough that Emma thought he might not answer. The wagon crested a hill, and suddenly there was a valley spread out below them, a creek running through it that caught the sunlight like scattered silver. "I told you about Sarah," he said finally. "My wife. What I did not tell you was how she died." Emma waited. "There was a fever going through the territory that winter. Bad one. Killed a lot of people, mostly the young and the old. Sarah was strong, healthy. I thought she would fight it off, but it got in her lungs and she could not breathe right, and there was not a doctor within 2 days' ride, even if we could have gotten her to one." His hands tightened on the reins. "She died in our bed. Took her days. Days of watching her struggle for air, of knowing there was nothing I could do except sit there and feel useless. I'm sorry." Afterward, people from town came by, brought food, offered condolences. All the things you do when someone dies. And Margaret Thornton, this was before she married into the family. She was just Margaret Hayes then. She pulled me aside and told me I needed to remarry quickly, that a man alone on a ranch would fall apart, that I needed a woman to keep house, to cook, to give me children before I got too old. Caleb's voice had gone flat. She actually had candidates picked out, suitable women, who would be grateful for the opportunity. That is horrible. That is Margaret, always organizing people's lives like we are chess pieces. He guided the wagon around a fallen log. I told her no. Told all of them no. I was not going to remarry just because it was convenient or expected. If I was going to share my life with someone again, it was going to be on my terms with someone who chose to be there instead of feeling obligated. And then I saw you get rejected at a train station and thought, perfect. I thought, there is someone who knows what it is like to be judged by other people's standards. Someone who is fighting to exist on her own terms, even when everyone is telling her she cannot. He looked at her, then really looked. I offered to marry you because I respect that fight. Because I think you deserve a place to catch your breath without having to defend your right to do it. And yeah, maybe because having someone else in the cabin, someone who gets it, might be better than being alone with my thoughts all winter. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to Emma in years. No pretense, no hidden agenda, just the plain truth laid out like tools on a workbench. Thank you, she said, for telling me. You are my wife now. Figure you deserve honesty at least. The word wife sat strange in Emma's mind. She was someone's wife. After all these years alone, after her first husband had drunk himself to death and left her with nothing but debts and relief that he was gone, she was married again. To a man who had just told her he wanted honesty. She could work with honesty. The cabin appeared as they came around a stand of pine trees, and Emma's first thought was that it looked solid. Not fancy, not pretty, but built by someone who knew what he was doing and cared about doing it right. Logs fitted tight together, a stone chimney rising from one end, windows with actual glass, a porch that ran the length of the front. Behind it was a barn, smaller than she had expected, and what looked like a chicken coop. It is not much, Caleb said, and she could hear the defensiveness in his voice. It is more than I had yesterday. He pulled the wagon to a stop, climbed down, came around to help her. The ground was frozen hard beneath her boots, and the silence pressed in from all sides. No sounds of town, no voices, no wagon wheels on dirt streets, just wind in the pines and the creak of the barn door swinging on its hinges. Let me show you around, Caleb said, and there was nervousness in the way he moved toward the cabin. Inside was dim after the brightness outside, but warm. A fire was already laid in the stove. He must have prepared it before leaving that morning. The main room held a table, 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the stove, shelves with dishes and supplies. A doorway led to what must be a bedroom. Everything was clean, organized, the space of someone who lived alone and had routines. I cleared out the bedroom for you, Caleb said. I will sleep out here. Emma turned to look at me. This is your house. It is our house now, and I am not going to... He stopped, started again. I told you this was an arrangement. I meant it. You key at the bedroom. I will make do with the main room. It is fine. Where did you sleep before? The bedroom. But that was before. Caleb. Emma set down her case. I appreciate what you are trying to do, but I am not going to kick you out of your own bed. We are both adults. We can figure out a solution that does not involve you sleeping on the floor for the rest of your life. He looked uncomfortable. Emma, is there another room? Storage? Anything? There is a loft. I use it for supplies mostly, but there is space up there. Show me. The loft was reached by a ladder in the corner, and it was exactly what he had said. A storage space with a slanted ceiling where the roof came down. But it was weather-tight, and there was a small window. And with some rearranging, it could work. I could set up a bed here, Emma said. It is private. It is warm enough with the heat rising from the stove. You keep your bedroom. I get my own space. Everyone is happy. That is not. You should not have to sleep in the loft. Why not? It is better than a lot of places I have slept. She climbed back down the ladder. I mean it, Caleb. I am not delicate. I do not need special treatment. I just need a place that is mine. He studied her face like he was trying to figure out if she meant it. All right, if you are sure. I'm sure. They spent the rest of the afternoon making the loft livable. Caleb hauled up a narrow bed frame and mattress from somewhere in the barn, helped her move boxes of supplies to make room, even found an extra blanket that was not too worn. By the time they finished, Emma had a space that was small, but hers. A bed, a trunk for her clothes, enough room to stand up if she was careful about the slanted ceiling. "Thank you," she said when they were back downstairs. "Do not thank me. This is your home now, too." Caleb looked around the cabin like he was seeing it through her eyes. "I know it is not what you expected. No, it is isolated and rough, and probably not anywhere you would choose to be if you had other options. I chose to be here," Emma said. "Maybe not the way I would have chosen if things were different, but I said yes. I married you. That was my choice." Something shifted in his expression. "All right, then." That night, Emma lay in her loft bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the cabin settling. The wind was different here, wilder, and there were animal sounds she could not identify. Below, she could hear Caleb moving around, banking the fire, getting ready for sleep. This was her life now. A cabin in the foothills, a husband who was essentially a stranger, work. She would have to figure out how to do a whole new way of existing that had nothing to do with sewing, or city streets, or the life she had known. She should have been terrified, but mostly she just felt tired, and maybe underneath the tired, something that might have been relief. Morning came too early and too cold. Emma woke to the sound of Caleb moving around below, the smell of coffee and something cooking. She climbed down the ladder to find him at the stove, frying eggs in a pan that had seen better days. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Coffee is hot if you want it." "Thank you." She poured herself a cup, wrapped her hands around it. The cabin was warm from the fire, but she could see her breath in the air near the windows. "I've got to check the stock this morning," Caleb said, sliding eggs onto 2 plates. "Should not take more than a couple hours. You can stay here. Get settled. There is bread in the box, cheese in the cold cupboard outside. I would rather come with you if that is all right." He looked surprised. "It is cold work. Boring. I would still rather come. I should learn what needs doing around here." They ate quickly, not talking much. Then Caleb handed her a coat, thick canvas lined with wool. Too big for her, but warmer than anything she owned. And they went out into the morning. The cold hit like a fist. Emma gasped, and Caleb steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Takes some getting used to," he said. "Breathe through your nose. Helps keep your lungs from freezing." They walked to the barn, and Caleb showed her the stock. 6 cattle, sturdy and thick-coated for winter. The chickens in their coop huddled together for warmth. His horse in a stall, plus another smaller one, he said had been Sarah's. "You will want to learn to ride eventually," he said. "Cannot always take the wagon, and walking everywhere will wear you out." "I'm willing to learn." He showed her how to check the water troughs, how to break the ice that formed overnight, how to measure out feed. His hands moved with the efficiency of someone who had done these tasks countless times, but he explained everything carefully, making sure she understood. "This is how I spend most days," he said, as they forked hay into the cattle pen. "Feeding, checking fence, cutting wood, fixing whatever broke. It is not exciting work. I spent years pushing needles through fabric. Exciting was never the point." "Fair enough." He leaned on his pitchfork, looking at her. "You sure you are going to be all right out here? It is not too late to change your mind. I could take you back to town. We could get the marriage annulled. You could. I am not changing my mind, even knowing how isolated it was, how hard the work was." "Caleb," Emma set down her pitchfork. "I crossed an ocean alone as a young woman. I survived a factory fire that killed people. I buried a husband who drank himself to death and spent years paying off his debts. I worked jobs that would have broken most men and kept working because the alternative was starving. So yes, I am sure. This is hard, but I have done hard before. He was quiet for a moment. You are tougher than you look. Everyone is if you give them reason to be. They finished with the animals and went back inside. Emma found herself looking around the cabin with new eyes, seeing the work that needed doing. The dishes from breakfast, the floor that needed sweeping, the mending pile she spotted on a shelf that looked as if it had been growing for months. "Can I ask what you do for clothes?" she said. "What do you mean?" "I mean, who does your mending, your washing, your sewing, when something tears beyond repair?" Caleb looked uncomfortable. "I manage. You manage badly from the look of that pile." Emma walked over to it, started sorting through. Shirts with missing buttons, pants with split seams, a coat with a hole in the elbow. "When is the last time any of this was properly fixed?" "I do not know. A while. I can fix these. It is what I do." "Emma, you do not have to." "I know I do not have to, but I want something to do with my hands, and you clearly need the help. Unless your plan was to wear clothes with holes until they fell apart completely." He almost smiled. "When you put it that way, I will need supplies. Thread, needles, fabric for patches. Do you go to town often?" "Once a week usually, weather permitting. For supplies, and to check if there is any mail or news. Then add sewing supplies to the list." Emma carried the mending pile to the table, started examining each piece. "And while we are there, I should let Mrs. Chen know I am still available for work if she needs it. I can ride back with you, do a few days of mending, ride back here." "You would do that? Go back and forth?" "Why not? It is income, and it will keep my skills sharp." She held up a shirt that was more whole than fabric. "This one is beyond saving, but I can use it for scrap material." Caleb sat down across from her, watching her work with an expression she could not quite read. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I do not know. Someone more." He stopped. "More what?" "Delicate, helpless, grateful. Maybe all of that." He looked down at his hands. "Most women I know would be crying or complaining or demanding to go back to town by now. I'm not most women. No, you really are not." They fell into a routine over the next days that surprised Emma with how quickly it felt normal. Caleb would wake first, get the fire going, start coffee. Emma would come down, and they would eat breakfast together, usually eggs, sometimes bacon or beans, always bread if they had it. Then Caleb would go out to work on whatever needed doing, and Emma would tackle the cabin. She cleaned first, properly cleaned, the kind of deep scrubbing that revealed what the place could be under the layers of bachelor neglect. She washed dishes that had been sitting, swept floors that had not seen a broom in months, organized shelves that had devolved into chaos. It felt good to impose order on something, to see immediate results from her work, and she sewed. She worked through Caleb's mending pile systematically, fixing what could be fixed, salvaging what could not for parts. Her hands remembered the rhythms, the muscle memory of years carrying her through, even when her mind wandered. Sometimes Caleb would come in for lunch, usually just bread and cheese eaten standing up, and he would see the progress she had made. And something would cross his face that looked like gratitude, mixed with confusion. "You do not have to do all this," he said one afternoon, looking at the newly organized shelves. "I know, but I am here, and it needs doing, and I would rather be useful than bored. Still, it is more than—" He stopped, tried again. "Thank you." In the evenings they would eat dinner together, usually something simple that Emma made from the supplies in the cold cupboard. Caleb was not much of a talker, but he would answer questions if she asked them. She learned about the ranch, about the work cycle through the seasons, about the neighbors who were scattered through the foothills, most of them a good hour's ride away. "So we are really alone out here," Emma said one night. "Pretty much. Does that bother you?" "I do not know yet. Ask me again in a month when I have gone stir-crazy from lack of human contact." He almost smiled. "If you do, we will go to town more often. I am not trying to keep you prisoner. I know." After dinner, Caleb would sit by the fire reading or working on small repairs, while Emma sewed. Sometimes they would talk, short exchanges about nothing important. Sometimes they would just exist in the same space, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. Then Emma would climb to her loft, and Caleb would bank the fire, and they would sleep in their separate spaces, and in the morning they would do it all again. It was not a marriage, not really. More like two people sharing a space and resources, being civil to each other, making it work because the alternative was worse. But it was stable, and after the chaos of the past months, stable felt like a luxury. A week after the wedding, Caleb announced they were going to town for supplies. "You want to come?" he asked. "Or would you rather stay here?" "I will come. I need to talk to Mrs. Chen about work." They took the wagon, the ride familiar now, though no less cold. As they approached cold water, Emma felt her stomach tighten. She had not been back since the wedding, had not faced the town as Mrs. Boone instead of the woman Thornton had rejected. "You all right?" Caleb asked. "Fine. You do not look fine." "I'm just—" She stopped. "People are going to talk about us, about the marriage. Let them talk. That is easy for you to say. You are not the one they were trying to run out of town." Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop just outside town limits. "Look at me." She did. "You are my wife now. That makes you off limits to their ordinances and their judgment and their small-minded cruelty. If anyone gives you trouble, you tell me. Understand? I can fight my own battles. I know you can, but you do not have to fight them alone anymore." His eyes were serious. "That is what this marriage means. Even if it is not conventional, we are partners. Your battles are my battles." Something loosened in Emma's chest. "Thank you." They rode into town, and just like she had expected, people stared. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as they passed. Women whispered behind their hands. Men looked away, then looked back, measuring. Caleb ignored all of it. He pulled up in front of the general store, helped Emma down, and walked in like he owned the place. Mrs. Chen looked up from the counter, saw them, and her face split into something that might have been a smile, if she did smiles. "Well," she said, "look who is still alive." Disappointed? Relieved. "I had a bet going with Riley that you would make it at least a month. Would have been annoying to lose after only a week." Caleb was looking at a list he had pulled from his pocket. "I need supplies. The usual, plus sewing things for Emma. I will get it together." Mrs. Chen turned to Emma. "You here for work? If you have it, always have it. That pile has not gotten smaller since you left." Mrs. Chen gestured toward the back room. "You can start now if you want. I will have Caleb's order ready in an hour." Emma looked at Caleb, who nodded. "I have got other business in town. I will come back for you." He left, and Emma went to the back room where the mending waited like an old friend. She picked up the first garment, a dress with a torn hem, and got to work, her hands moving automatically while her mind processed everything. She was married, living in a cabin an hour from town, about to split her time between ranch work and sewing, building a life that looked nothing like anything she had imagined, but was starting to feel possible. The door chimed, and Margaret Thornton walked in. Emma's hand stilled on the dress. Margaret saw her, and something cold passed over her face. She walked to the counter where Mrs. Chen was measuring out flour. "I heard Caleb Boone got married," Margaret said, her voice pitched to Carrie. "To that woman who was living here, the unsuitable one." "If you are asking if Emma Vale is now Emma Boone, then yes," Mrs. Chen said without looking up. "How convenient. Just in time to avoid the ordinance." Margaret's smile was sharp. "Though I have to wonder what kind of marriage it really is. Two strangers living together out of convenience rather than genuine affection. Emma set down the dress and walked to the front. "You are wondering about my marriage, Mrs. Thornton?" Margaret turned, and there was satisfaction in her eyes at having provoked a response. "I am simply concerned for Caleb. He is a respected member of this community. It would be unfortunate if he had been taken advantage of by someone desperate for security. The only thing desperate here is your need to control other people's lives." Emma kept her voice level. "I am married legally, properly by the sheriff himself, which means your ordinance cannot touch me, which means I win. This is not about winning. Yes, it is. It is about you deciding I did not belong here and trying to force me out. But I am still here. I am married to a man with more land and respect than your husband will ever have, and there is not a single thing you can do about it." Emma smiled, and it was not kind. "So if you are done making sure I know you disapprove, I have work to do." Margaret's face flushed red. "You will regret this, both of you. That marriage will not last 6 months. Maybe not. But that is between me and my husband, not you." Margaret turned and walked out, her back rigid with fury. Mrs. Chen let out a low whistle. "Well, that was satisfying to watch. Was I too harsh? You were perfect. Margaret has been needing someone to stand up to her for years." Mrs. Chen went back to measuring flour. "Though she is right about one thing. She is going to make this difficult for you. Let her try. I have dealt with worse." Emma went back to her mending, but her hands were shaking slightly. It felt good to stand up to Margaret, to claim her place without apology. But it also felt dangerous, like she had just declared war on someone with more power and connections than she would ever have. When Caleb came back, Emma had finished 3 garments and started a 4th. He looked at the work, then at her face. Something happened. It was not a question. Margaret Thornton came in. "We had words." "What kind of words?" Emma told him. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he just nodded. "Good," he said. "It is about time someone told Margaret where to put her opinions. She said our marriage will not last 6 months. She is probably right. But that is our business, not hers." He picked up the supplies Mrs. Chen had packed. "You ready to go home?" "Home." The word landed different than it had before. "Yes," Emma said. "I am ready." They rode back in silence, the sun starting to sink toward the mountains, painting everything gold and orange. Emma looked at the landscape, harsh and beautiful and unforgiving, and thought about what Margaret had said. A marriage of convenience, 2 strangers living together out of necessity rather than love. It was all true. But maybe truth was not the weakness Margaret thought it was. Maybe there was strength in choosing practicality over romance and building something real instead of pretending it is something perfect. "Caleb," she said as they approached the cabin. "Yeah, thank you for what you said back there about my battles being your battles. I meant it. I know. That is why it matters." That night, lying in her loft, listening to the wind test the cabin walls, Emma thought about the life she was building. It was not the life she had imagined when she boarded that train with Thornton's letter in her pocket. It was not even the life she had imagined a month ago when she agreed to marry a stranger to avoid an ordinance. But it was hers, chosen, claimed, defended. And maybe that was enough. The lie revealed itself on an ordinary afternoon. Emma was mending fence with Caleb. She had insisted on learning, and he had been teaching her with the patient frustration of someone who was not used to explaining things he did by instinct. The work was brutal. Her hands blistered even through gloves. Her back screamed from bending over wire that fought every attempt to tame it. A rider appeared on the eastern ridge, moving fast. Caleb straightened, went still in a way that made Emma nervous. "Who is it?" she asked. "Tom Hendricks runs the cattle operation north of here." Caleb set down his tools. He would not ride out here unless something was wrong. They met Hendricks at the cabin. He was off his horse before it fully stopped, his face red from cold and exertion. "Boone, we got a problem. Water rights meeting in town tomorrow. Emergency session. The territorial office is reviewing all the claims in the valley." Hendricks was breathing hard. "They are saying some of the older claims might not be valid anymore, that people need to provide documentation or risk losing access." Caleb's expression did not change, but something shifted in his posture. "What kind of documentation?" "Deeds, surveys, original land grants, proof you own what you say you own." Hendricks glanced at Emma, then back to Caleb. "Word is someone filed a complaint. Said there has been confusion about who actually owns what, especially up in the foothills. Said they want it clarified before spring, when everyone starts using more water. Someone—" Caleb's voice was flat. "Got a name?" "Margaret Thornton. She is claiming her husband's ranch boundaries were never properly surveyed, that there might be overlap with neighboring properties." Hendricks shifted his weight. "Look, I do not know what this is about, but you need to be there tomorrow with every piece of paper you have got that proves this place is yours." After Hendricks left, Caleb stood on the porch, looking out at the land like he was seeing it for the first time. Emma waited, watching the tension build in his shoulders. "How much of this land is actually yours?" she asked quietly. He did not answer right away. "All of it," Caleb said. "It is complicated, then uncomplicated." He turned to face her, and there was something in his eyes she had not seen before. Not quite shame, but close. "I told you I was a ranch hand, that I had a cabin and some land. That was not the whole truth." Emma felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What is the whole truth?" "I own a large spread. This cabin, the valley below, the foothills running up to the tree line. I have got the largest cattle operation in the territory outside of the big ranches near Helena. I employ men during peak season. I have contracts with buyers in 3 states. He paused. "And I did not tell you because I wanted you to choose this place for what it was, not what it represented." The words hung in the cold air between them. "You lied to me," Emma said. "I did not lie. I just did not tell you everything. That is the same thing." Her voice was shaking now, anger and betrayal mixing into something that felt like being rejected all over again. "You let me think you were just a cowboy with a cabin. You let me believe I was marrying someone in the same situation I was. Someone trying to get by. Someone who understood what it meant to have nothing. You were marrying someone trying to get by. Money does not make life easier, Emma. It just makes the problems different. Do not." She held up a hand. "Do not you dare stand there and tell me money does not matter. I have been poor my entire life. I know exactly what it means to count every penny, to go hungry so you can pay rent, to watch opportunities pass by because you cannot afford to reach for them. And you," she gestured at the cabin, the land, everything. "You had all this, and you pretended to be something you were not. I pretended to be what I am, a man who works his land and lives in a cabin and does not need the complications that come with people knowing what he is worth." Caleb's jaw was tight. "You think I lied? I have had women come out here looking for a rich husband. I have had men trying to befriend me so they could ask for loans. I have had the whole damn town treat me different once they knew, like I was a prize to be won instead of a person to be known. So yeah, I kept it quiet. I wanted you to see me, not my bank account. I did see you. I saw someone who offered me honesty, who said this was a partnership." Emma's hands were fists at her sides. "But it was never equal, was it? You had power this whole time. You could have helped me in town, could have shut down Margaret's ordinance with one word, but instead you let me struggle and fight and feel desperate enough to marry a stranger. I offered you a choice. That is different than rescuing you. No, you offered me an illusion of choice. You made me think we were equals when the whole time you held all the cards. She turned away, could not look at him anymore. I need to think. Emma, do not. Just give me space. She walked toward the barn, not because she had anywhere to go, but because she could not stand being near him. Behind her, she heard Caleb say something that might have been her name, but she kept walking. Inside the barn, the animals stirred at her presence. Emma sat on a hay bale and let herself feel the full weight of it. She had been so careful, so cautious about this marriage, about trusting Caleb, about believing this arrangement could work. And all along, he had been someone else entirely. Someone with wealth and power and resources he had hidden from her. Why? That was what she could not understand. If he was rich, why live like this? Why the simple cabin, the rough clothes, the life that looked barely different from poverty? Unless he had been testing her. Unless this whole thing had been some kind of experiment to see if she was different from the other women who had wanted his money. The thought made her sick. She did not know how long she sat there before Riley appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Chen sent me," Riley said, leaning against the frame. "Heard there was trouble. Figured you might need a friendly face. How did you—" Hendrik stopped by the store on his way back to his place. Told Mrs. Chen about the water rights meeting. She put together that Caleb probably had to tell you the truth about who he is. Riley came closer, sat on the hay bale next to Emma. And that you would be feeling about how you are probably feeling right now. He lied to me. He omitted. It is different. Is it? Riley was quiet for a moment. You know what I think? I think Caleb Boone is so used to being seen as a bank account that he forgot how to be seen as a person. And when he saw you at that train station, someone who had been judged and found wanting for all the wrong reasons, he saw a chance to be judged for the right ones. That does not make it okay. No, but it makes it human. Riley looked at her. You are mad because he did not tell you he was rich. But would you have married him if you had known? If he had shown up that night and said, "Marry me. I own half the territory." Emma opened her mouth to say yes, then stopped. Would she have? Or would she have thought it was charity, pity, some rich man's whim to help the poor woman? Would she have been able to accept it without feeling like she owed him everything? I do not know, she admitted. Exactly. And he probably knew that too. Riley stood, brushed hay off her pants. Look, I am not saying he was right to keep it from you, but I am saying maybe his reasons were not about controlling you. Maybe they were about giving you room to choose without the weight of obligation. After Riley left, Emma sat alone with her thoughts. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something else. Hurt, yes. Betrayal, definitely. But also a creeping understanding that Riley might be right. If Caleb had told her the truth that night he proposed, she would have said no. She would have convinced herself it was charity, that she could not possibly accept that owing someone that much would destroy whatever independence she had left. But he had not given her that burden. He had given her a simple choice. Marry him or face the town council. No debt, no obligation. Just an arrangement between equals. Except they were not equals. They never had been. She walked back to the cabin as the sun started to set. Caleb was sitting on the porch steps, still in his work clothes, looking out at the valley like it held answers. I need to know something, Emma said without preamble. When you offered to marry me, was it because you felt sorry for me? No. Then why? Caleb stood, faced her. Because I saw someone fighting to exist on her own terms, and I respected that fight. Because I thought maybe if we both stopped fighting alone, we could build something better together. He paused. And because I am tired, Emma. Tired of being seen as what I own, instead of who I am. Tired of people wanting things from me. Tired of being alone in a house I built for a future that died some years ago. You should have told me. I know. I should have told you a lot of things. Should have told you about the land, about the money, about why Margaret Thornton really wants me brought down." He ran a hand through his hair. "She wanted me to marry her niece. Been pushing for it for some time. When I married you instead, I did not just escape her ordinance. I embarrassed her, made her look like she could not control things. That is why she filed the complaint about water rights. She is trying to hurt me by questioning my land claims." "Can she actually take your land?" "No, my deeds are solid. Everything is documented. But she can make it expensive and public and embarrassing. She can drag me through territorial court and make sure everyone knows the details of what I own." His voice was bitter, which is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Emma looked at him, really looked at the exhaustion in his face, the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself like he was bracing for another blow. "I am still angry at you," she said. "I know you took away my ability to make an informed choice. I know that too, but I also understand why you did it. Does not make it right, but I understand." She crossed her arms. "So here is what is going to happen. We are going to that meeting tomorrow. You are going to prove your land claims, and then we are going to come back here and have a real conversation about this marriage, about what it actually is and what we want it to be. No more secrets, no more omissions, just truth. All right, and Caleb, if you ever lie to me again, even by omission, I am done. I do not care how good your reasons are. I need honesty more than I need security. Understood?" They stood there in a fading light, the distance between them measured in more than just feet. Something had broken, but Emma did not know yet if it could be fixed or if they would just have to learn to live with the cracks. The meeting was held in the town hall, a building Emma had never been inside. It was crowded, every rancher in the territory apparently having decided this was important enough to show up for. They all looked at Caleb when he walked in, and Emma could see the calculation in their eyes, weighing what they knew against what they had suspected, seeing him differently now that it was public knowledge who he really was. Margaret sat in the front row with her husband, a thin man who looked as if he had been worn down by years of being married to her. Her smile, when she saw Caleb, was sharp enough to cut. The territorial officer was a tired-looking man named Barrett, who clearly wanted to be anywhere but here. He called the meeting to order, explained the situation. Complaints had been filed about unclear property boundaries. Water rights were at stake. Documentation was required. "We will start with the Thornton claim," Barrett said, pulling out papers. "Mr. Thornton, your ranch borders 3 other properties. You have stated there is confusion about where your land ends and your neighbor's begins." What followed was an hour of tedious back and forth about surveys and stakes and historical boundaries. Emma tried to follow it, but mostly just watched the room. The way people shifted when Caleb was mentioned, the way they leaned in when the discussion turned to who owned what. Finally, Barrett got to Caleb. "Mr. Boone, you have been named specifically in this complaint. Mrs. Thornton suggests your northern boundary may overlap with Thornton property, and that your water rights from the creek may be in dispute." Caleb stood, and the room went quiet. He pulled a folder from his coat, handed it to Barrett. "Everything is there. Original land grant, surveyed boundaries, water rights filed with the territorial office. My land has been properly documented since my father acquired it." Barrett examined the papers. "These appear to be in order." "They are in order." Caleb's voice was level, but there was steel underneath. "My father spent years building this ranch. When he died, he left it to me with every piece of paperwork properly filed and recorded. There is no confusion about boundaries. There is no dispute about water rights. What there is someone trying to cause trouble because they are unhappy about a personal matter that has nothing to do with land management." Margaret stood up. "That is slander. It is the truth. You have been pushing your niece at me for some time. When I married someone else, you filed this complaint out of spite. Caleb looked at her directly. We both know it. Everyone in this room knows it. The question is whether the territorial office is going to waste time and resources on your wounded pride. The room erupted, people talking over each other, some defending Margaret, others agreeing with Caleb. Barrett banged his gavel until they quieted down. Mrs. Thornton, do you have documentation supporting your boundary dispute? Barrett asked. Margaret's face was red. The lack of clarity. Do you have documentation? No, but then this complaint is dismissed. Barrett gathered his papers. Mr. Boone's claims are properly recorded and filed. Unless someone has actual evidence of a legitimate dispute, this meeting is over. People filed out slowly, the energy in the room crackling with gossip that would fuel conversations for weeks. Emma stayed close to Caleb, watching the way people looked at him now. Some with respect, some with envy, some with the hungry calculation of people seeing opportunity. Margaret intercepted them at the door. This is not over. Yeah, it is, Caleb said quietly. I know you are angry. I know you think I embarrassed you by marrying Emma instead of your niece, but you need to let it go. I am not interested in your family. I am not interested in your approval, and I am sure as hell not interested in your attempts to control my life. You made a mockery of this town with that marriage. A woman of questionable character marrying you for your money. Except she did not know about the money. Caleb cut in. I did not tell her until yesterday. She married me thinking I was a ranch hand with a cabin. So your theory about her being a gold digger, it does not hold water any more than your boundary dispute did. Margaret looked at Emma then. Really looked. And something flickered in her expression that might have been doubt. Is that true? She asked. Emma could have lied. Could have let Margaret think she had known all along, that she had been playing a long game. But what was the point? It is true, she said. I thought I was marrying someone like me, someone trying to survive. I found out yesterday he owns half the territory, and you are still here. I am still here. Emma met her eyes. Not because of what he owns, because of who he is. They walked out into the cold afternoon, and Emma could feel the weight of eyes following them. The whole town would be talking by nightfall. The rich rancher and the mail-order bride nobody wanted. The scandal that kept getting more complicated. You all right? Caleb asked as they climbed into the wagon. I do not know. Ask me later. Emma pulled the blanket around herself. You were right about one thing. Money does not make problems go away. It just makes them different. Yeah, they rode in silence for a while. The town fell away behind them, replaced by open land, and sky so big it made Emma feel small in a way that was not entirely uncomfortable. Can I ask you something? She said. Go ahead. If you have all this land, all this money, why do you live like you do? The simple cabin, the plain clothes, the life that looks barely different from poverty. Caleb was quiet for long enough that Emma thought he might not answer. Then he said, because simple is honest. You cannot lie to yourself about who you are when you are living simple. The cabin needs fixing, you fix it. The animals need feeding, you feed them. Everything is direct, straightforward, no pretense. But you were pretending with me. I was trying to... He glanced at her, trying to be just a man instead of a wealthy rancher. Trying to see if someone could want me for something other than what I own. And I know that is not fair to you. I know I should have been honest from the start. But I was tired of being wanted for the wrong reasons. Did it occur to you that maybe I would have wanted you for the right reasons, even if I knew? No, he said simply. Because everyone wants the money. Even when they say they do not, they do. It changes how people see you, how they treat you, what they expect from you. And I did not want that with you. I wanted... He stopped. What did you want? A chance to build something real. Something that was not about what I could provide or what you could take. Just two people trying to make a life work. His hands tightened on the reins. I wanted what I had with Sarah before she got sick. Someone who saw me. Not my bank account, not my land, not my standing in the community. Just me. Emma felt something shift in her chest. Anger was still there, but underneath it was understanding. He had been just as desperate as she was, just desperate for different things. I cannot promise I will forgive you quickly, she said. And I cannot promise this will not change things between us. But I can promise I will try if you promise no more secrets. No more secrets, Caleb agreed. Back at the cabin, they fell into the evening routine. But everything felt different now. Caleb made dinner. Beans and bacon, bread left over from the day before, while Emma sat at the table, sorting through the sewing she had brought back from town. They moved around each other carefully, like two people learning to navigate a space that had shifted under their feet. I have been thinking, Caleb said as they ate, about what you said, about this marriage, about what it is and what we want it to be. Emma set down her fork. And I think we need to be honest about what we have got here. It is not a love match. We both know that. But it is also not just a business arrangement anymore. We are living together, working together, building something together. That matters. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we stop trying to define it and just let it be whatever it becomes. No pressure, no expectations, just partnership. Real partnership, where we are both honest about what we want and what we are willing to give. Emma thought about that, about letting go of the need to categorize what they had, to make it fit into boxes labeled real marriage or arrangement or temporary solution, about just existing in the space they had created and seeing where it led. I can work with that, she said. Yeah. Caleb looked at her across the table. Then here is a hard truth. I am glad you are here. Not because you are useful or because you solve a problem. Because having someone else in this cabin, someone who gets what it means to fight for a life, makes it feel less like I am just existing, and more like I am actually living. The words landed soft but solid, like snow accumulating on a roof. Emma did not know what to say to that, so she just nodded. They cleaned up together, washed dishes in water heated on the stove, put away food for tomorrow. Then Caleb sat by the fire with a book he was not really reading, while Emma sewed in the lamplight, and the silence between them felt less like distance and more like comfort. That night, lying in her loft bed, Emma thought about choices and truth, and the strange path that had led her here. She had been rejected, dismissed, told she was not enough. She had fought her way into a life that was barely sustainable. She had married a stranger to avoid being run out of town. And now she was lying in a cabin owned by one of the wealthiest men in the territory, married to someone who had hidden his wealth because he wanted to be seen as a person rather than a prize. It was absurd. It was complicated. It was nothing like anything she had imagined. But lying there in the dark, listening to Caleb move around below, hearing him bank the fire and settle in for sleep, Emma realized something that surprised her. She did not want to leave. Not because of the money. She still barely believed that part was real. Not because she was afraid of being alone or starting over again, but because for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like she was building something that might actually last. Something that was not about survival or desperation or making do with whatever scraps life threw at her. Something that was hers by choice, not circumstance. The crack in their relationship was still there. Trust once broken did not heal overnight. But maybe it did not need to heal completely to be functional. Maybe cracks were just part of building something real. Visible evidence that the structure had been tested and survived. Morning came cold and bright. Emma woke to the smell of coffee and went down to find Caleb already dressed for the day's work. "Sleep all right?" he asked. "Well enough. You?" "About the same." He poured her coffee, handed it to her. "I thought today we could work on the chicken coop. It needs reinforcing before the next big storm, and it is easier with 2 people." "All right." They worked through the morning side by side, not talking much, but moving together with the kind of coordination that came from shared purpose. The work was hard. Hauling lumber, driving nails, fighting with wire that had its own ideas about where it wanted to go. But it felt good to build something, to see progress measured in reinforced walls and secure corners. Around midday, Riley showed up with a basket. "Mrs. Chen sent food," she said, climbing down from her horse. "She figured you 2 might be too stubborn to stop for lunch." They sat on the porch steps, eating bread and cheese and apples that were starting to go soft. Riley looked between them with the kind of assessment that saw more than Emma was comfortable with. "You 2 work it out?" she asked finally. "Working on it," Emma said. "Good. Town has already got enough to gossip about without you 2 splitting up and proving Margaret right." Riley bit into an apple. "Speaking of which, she is telling everyone who will listen that you are only staying with Caleb because you found out he is rich." "Let her talk," Caleb said. "I plan to. But Emma should know what she is walking into next time she comes to town." Riley looked at her. "People are going to make assumptions about why you married him, about what you want, about whether this is real or just you playing a long game." "Let them assume," Emma said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "I know why I'm here. Caleb knows why I'm here. Their opinions do not change reality." Riley grinned. "There is the spine I was hoping to see. Hold on to that." After Riley left, Emma and Caleb went back to work. The sun moved across the sky. The temperature dropped, and gradually the chicken coop transformed from something barely standing to something that might actually survive the winter. "You are good at this," Caleb said, as they stepped back to admire their work. "At what?" "Building. Fixing things. Making them better." He looked at her. "I know you are a seamstress, but you have got carpenter hands too. Quick, precise, knowing where things need to go. I have had a lot of practice fixing things that were broken." Emma pulled off her gloves. "Turns out buildings are not that different from clothes. Find the weak spots, reinforce them, make sure everything is connected, right? Is that what we are doing? Finding weak spots and reinforcing them. Maybe is that a bad thing?" "No," Caleb said. "I think it might be exactly the right thing." Winter came hard that year, turning the world into something sharp and unforgiving. Snow piled up against the cabin walls, drifted across the roads until they disappeared completely, made the simple act of getting from the house to the barn feel like an expedition. Emma learned what real cold meant, the kind that turned your breath to ice crystals in the air, that made your lungs ache when you breathed too deep, that could kill you if you were not careful. But she also learned what it meant to have shelter that held, walls that did not leak, a stove that kept burning, a roof that shed snow instead of collapsing under its weight. Caleb had built well, and that mattered when the temperature dropped so low the water in the basin froze solid overnight. They fell into rhythms born of necessity. Caleb would wake first, get the fire going hot enough to take the edge off the cold. Emma would come down and make breakfast while he went out to check the animals. They would eat together, plan the day's work, then split up to tackle whatever needed doing. Evenings, they would spend close to the fire, Caleb reading or carving small pieces of wood into useful shapes, Emma sewing by lamplight until her eyes could not focus anymore. It was not romance, but it was partnership, and that counted for something. Sometime after the water rights meeting, on a day when the cold had eased enough to make the ride possible, they went to town for supplies. The road was still difficult, the wagon struggling through snow that had not been cleared. but Caleb knew the route well enough to avoid the worst drifts. Cold water looked different under snow. Cleaner somehow, all the rough edges smoothed over by white that covered everything equally. People moved between buildings quickly, not lingering to talk. Everyone focused on getting inside before the cold found the gaps in their defenses. Mrs. Chen's store was warm and crowded, ranch hands picking up supplies, families stocking up before the next storm, everyone talking over each other in that way people did when they had been isolated too long and needed the comfort of other voices. Mrs. Chen saw them come in, and her face did something that might have been a smile if she allowed such things. "About time," she said. "I was starting to think you two had frozen solid out there." "Almost did," Emma said, unwrapping the scarf from around her face. "How is business?" "Steady. People need clothes mended even in winter, maybe especially in winter." Mrs. Chen gestured toward the back room. "Got a pile waiting if you have got time." While Caleb gathered supplies, Emma went to examine the mending. The pile had grown since she had last been in. Shirts with torn elbows, pants with split seams, a coat that needed new buttons and a patch on the shoulder. Work she could do with her eyes closed. She was sorting through it when Margaret Thornton walked in. Emma braced herself for another confrontation, but Margaret just stood there for a moment, looking at her with an expression that was hard to read. "Mrs. Boone," Margaret said finally, "I would like to speak with you privately if possible." Emma glanced at Mrs. Chen, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "All right," Emma said. They went to the corner of the store where bolts of fabric were stacked, far enough from other customers to have some privacy. Margaret seemed uncomfortable, her hands moving restlessly like she could not figure out what to do with them. "I owe you an apology," Margaret said, the words coming out stiff like they hurt. "For the way I treated you when you first arrived. For the ordinance, for the water rights complaint. For all of it." Emma waited. There had to be more. "My niece married someone else last month," Margaret continued. "A store clerk from Helena. She seems happy. And standing at her wedding, watching her choose someone for herself, instead of accepting who I had picked for her, I realized." She stopped, took a breath. "I realized I have been trying to control things I had no right to control, including who Caleb Boone married. Why are you telling me this? Because I was wrong about you, about your marriage, about your reasons for being here." Margaret met her eyes. "I assumed the worst because it fit my narrative, but I have been watching and the way people talk about you two. It is not what I expected. You work together. You show up to town together. You look at each other like you are actually partners instead of strangers playing at marriage. We are partners. I believe you now." Margaret's voice was quiet. "And I am sorry it took me this long to see it." The apology sat between them, unexpected and awkward. Emma did not know what to do with it. Part of her wanted to throw it back, to tell Margaret that sorry did not undo the months of judgment and cruelty. But another part, the part that was tired of fighting, just wanted to accept it and move on. "Thank you for saying that," Emma said finally. "It does not fix everything, but it is something. It is more than I deserve." Margaret turned to go, then paused. "For what it is worth, I think Caleb made the right choice. You are stronger than I gave you credit for." After she left, Mrs. Chen appeared at Emma's elbow. "Well, that was interesting. Was that real? Or is she playing some kind of long game? With Margaret? Who knows? But I have known her a long time, and she does not apologize unless she means it." Mrs. Chen handed Emma a cup of tea that appeared from nowhere. "People can surprise you, even the ones you are sure you have got figured out." Caleb found them a few minutes later, his arms full of supplies. He looked between Emma and Mrs. Chen, reading something in their expressions. "What happened?" Margaret Thornton apologized. "For what?" "Everything, apparently." Caleb set down his supplies. "You believe her?" "I do not know, but I do not think I care anymore. I am tired of carrying around anger at people who do not matter. Emma picked up a shirt from the mending pile. Can we stay a few hours? I would like to work through some of this. Yeah, I have got business at the bank anyway. I will come back for you. The bank. Right. Because her husband was one of the wealthiest men in the territory. Emma still had not fully processed that fact. The cabin looked the same. Their life looked the same. Everything felt exactly as it had before she knew, which meant either Caleb was very good at living simply, or the money was mostly theoretical. She worked through 6 garments before Caleb returned, her hands moving through familiar patterns, while her mind wandered. This was what she was good at, fixing things, making them whole again, finding solutions to problems that could be solved with patience and skill. Her life with Caleb felt similar. They were 2 damaged things learning to function together, covering each other's weak spots, building something that worked even if it was not traditional. When Caleb came back, there was something different in his expression. Not quite excitement, but close. I need to show you something, he said. Can you leave the mending for now? They rode not to the cabin, but to a different part of Caleb's land, a section Emma had not seen before. The valley opened up here, wider and flatter, with the creek running through it like a silver thread. And in the middle of it all, barely visible under snow, was the skeleton of a building. Caleb stopped the wagon, helped her down. They walked toward it, their boots breaking through the snow crust with each step. What is this? Emma asked. I started building it some time ago before I stopped. I was going to make it a home, a real house, not just a cabin, something with multiple rooms, space for a family, built to last generations. His voice was quiet. But after Sarah died, I stopped working on it, did not see the point anymore. The foundation was solid stone and mortar that had survived the winter. The frame was up, the bones of walls and roof visible even under snow. It was bigger than the cabin, much bigger, with space for at least 4 rooms on the ground floor and what looked like an upper story. Why are you showing me this now? Caleb looked at the unfinished house, then at her. Because I am thinking about finishing it, and I wanted to know if you would want to help design it, make it into something we both want, instead of something I planned alone. The offer hit Emma harder than she had expected. This was not about the money or the land. This was about building a future together, about making choices as partners instead of individuals, forced together by circumstance. You are serious, she said. I am serious. We could finish it by next winter if we start in spring. Hire some help for the heavy work, but do most of it ourselves. Make it exactly what we need. He turned to face her fully. I know our marriage is not conventional. I know we are still figuring out what we are to each other. But we are building something, Emma. Might as well have a house that reflects that. Emma walked around the foundation, trying to see what it could become. A kitchen with space for a real stove and a table big enough for guests. A separate room for sewing with good light from south-facing windows. Bedrooms upstairs, enough that they could each have their own space, plus rooms for... She stopped that thought before it went further. They were not there yet. Might never be there. I would want a big window in the kitchen, she said instead. And shelves built into the walls for storage, and a covered porch where we could sit in summer. Done. What else? They spent time walking through snow, mapping out rooms that did not exist yet, planning details that were still months away from reality. And somewhere in the middle of it, Emma realized she was excited. Actually, genuinely excited about building something permanent. Something that said, we are staying. We are not running. This is our life. That night, back at the cabin, they sat close to the fire while wind rattled the windows. Caleb was sketching rough plans on paper, trying to capture the ideas they had talked about. Emma was mending one of his shirts, replacing buttons that had been missing for who knew how long. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said without looking up from his drawings. "Always. Do you regret it? Marrying me?" The question hung in the warm air between them. Emma set down the shirt, thought about how to answer honestly. "I regret that you lied about who you were," she said. "I regret that we started from a place of incomplete truth. But do I regret the marriage itself? No. It has given me something I did not have before." "What is that?" "Choice. Real choice. Not just picking the least bad option." She looked at him. "For the first time in my life, I am building something because I want to, not because I have to. That matters. Even though I am not," he gestured vaguely, "even though this is not a love match. Love is complicated, Caleb. My first marriage was supposedly built on love, and it was the most miserable years of my life. He loved me right up until the drinking mattered more than I did. So maybe love is not the foundation I need." She picked up her sewing again. "Partnership, though. Honesty. Building something together that feels more solid. What if it became more than partnership? Would that be—" He stopped, tried again. "Would you want it to be?" Emma's hand stilled on the fabric. They had been dancing around this question for months, both of them too careful to say it out loud. She thought about the way they moved around each other in the cabin, the rhythms they had developed, the small kindnesses that had become routine, the way her heart did something strange when she saw him coming back from checking the stock covered in snow, his face red from cold. The way she had started thinking of the cabin as home instead of shelter. "I do not know," she said honestly. "I am still figuring out what we have now. Asking what it could become feels like getting ahead of myself." "Fair enough." But there was something in his voice that sounded like disappointment. They went back to their separate tasks, but the question lingered. Emma climbed to her loft that night and lay awake thinking about it. Did she want more? Could she let herself want more with someone who had already proven he could lie, even if his reasons had been understandable? The answer came to her slowly, piece by piece, like fabric being sewn together. She trusted Caleb now in ways she had not before. Trusted that when he said he would check the north fence, it would get checked. Trusted that when he said they had enough firewood to make it through the week, they did. Trusted that when he looked at her, he saw her, and not just a solution to loneliness. Trust was different than love, but maybe it was a better foundation. Spring came grudgingly, the snow melting in patches, the ground turning to mud that made every step an effort. But with it came the possibility of building, and Caleb threw himself into planning the house with an intensity that surprised Emma. He hired workers from town, men who needed the income, and did not ask too many questions about why the richest rancher in the territory had been living in a cabin like a common cowhand. Emma divided her time between the house project and her sewing work in town. She would go in twice a week, spend long days working through Mrs. Chen's mending pile, then ride back with Caleb in the evening. The money she made was hers. Caleb had insisted on that, and watching it accumulate gave her a sense of security she had never had before. The first time she put money in the bank, her own account in her own name, she stood at the counter for a long moment, just looking at the deposit slip. "You all right, Mrs. Boone?" the bank clerk asked. "I have never had a bank account before," she admitted. "Never had enough money to make it worth the trouble." "Well, you do now, and it is yours. Nobody can touch it without your permission." The concept was still strange. Money that was hers, not tied to a husband or a job that could disappear or circumstances beyond her control. Independence measured in dollars and cents. She walked out of the bank to find Riley waiting, leaning against the hitching post like she had all day. "How does it feel?" Riley asked. "Strange." "Good." Strange, but good. Get used to it. You have earned it. Riley fell into step beside her. Town is talking, about how Caleb Boone's wife works for her own money instead of just spending his. Some people think it is admirable. Others think it is weird. What do you think? I think it is smart. Money he gives you is his. Money you earn is yours. Big difference. Riley glanced at her. You two doing all right? Have not heard any gossip about fighting or him kicking you out or you running off. We are fine. Better than fine, actually. Emma surprised herself by meaning it. We are building a house together. I heard. Everyone has heard. It is all anyone talks about. Caleb Boone finally finishing that house he started for Sarah. Riley's voice gentled. How do you feel about that? Living in a house he built for his dead wife? It is not the same house. We changed the plans, made it into something different, something that is ours instead of his and Sarah's. Emma had thought about this a lot, had worried about living in a ghost's shadow. But the more they worked on it, the more it became its own thing. Besides, everyone carries their past. His just happened to be visible in stone and timber. They reached the general store to find Mrs. Chen directing deliveries with the authority of a general commanding troops. She saw Emma and Riley and immediately put them to work unloading fabric bolts that had just arrived from back east. Finally got the good stuff, Mrs. Chen said, running her hands over calico and muslin. Been waiting months for this shipment. People are going to want new clothes once the weather warms up. I could make some ready-made dresses, Emma offered. Sell them here in the store. Save people the trouble of ordering from catalogs. Mrs. Chen's eyes sharpened with interest. You know how to make patterns that fit different sizes. I've been doing it for years. I can make 3 or 4 basic patterns. Adjust them as needed for individual customers. Do it. I will provide the fabric at cost. You keep 70% of what they sell for. It was more than generous, and Emma knew it. Mrs. Chen was not just offering her work. She was offering her a business. Thank you, Emma said. Do not thank me. Just make dresses that do not fall apart after one washing. Mrs. Chen went back to her inventory. And Emma, I am proud of you. You came here with nothing, and you have built something real. That takes guts. Over the next weeks, Emma threw herself into dressmaking with the same intensity Caleb brought to building the house. She worked in the cabin's main room, cutting patterns on the table, sewing by the window where the light was best. She made simple dresses first, practical cotton in dark colors that would not show dirt, with enough fabric in the seams to be let out if needed. Caleb would come in from working on the house covered in sawdust and sweat, and find her surrounded by fabric and thread, and something would cross his face that looked like contentment. You happy? He said one evening, watching her work. I am. Emma looked up from her sewing. Is that surprising? A little. This is not the life you planned when you got on that train. No, but it is better than what I planned. She tied off a thread, cut it clean. I planned to be someone's wife, someone's help, someone's support. I did not plan to have my own work, my own money, my own voice in how things get built. You always had your own voice. I just had to learn to listen. The house went up faster than Emma expected. By early summer, the walls were complete, the roof was on, and they were working on the interior. Caleb had hired a carpenter from town to do the detailed work, but he and Emma did as much as they could themselves. She learned to hang doors, to fit windows, to measure and cut and build with her hands instead of just her needle. One afternoon, working on installing shelves in what would be her sewing room, Caleb said, I have been thinking about hiring more hands, expanding the cattle operation, running more stock through the summer. All right, what is stopping you? Nothing really. Just it will mean more people around, less privacy. The life we have now, it is quiet, simple. That will change. Emma set down her hammer. Is that what you want? To keep things quiet and simple. I do not know. Caleb looked around the unfinished room. Part of me does, but another part thinks we are building this big house. Seems wasteful to have all this space and not use it. Not build something bigger. Then build something bigger. Hire the hands. Expand the operation. She moved closer to him. We do not have to keep living small just because it is comfortable. We can take risks, try things, see what works, even if it fails, especially if it fails. At least then, we will know we tried. Something shifted in his expression. When did you get so brave? I am not brave. I am just tired of being afraid. She picked up her hammer again. And I figure if I can survive crossing an ocean, losing everything in a fire, and marrying a stranger who turned out to be secretly rich, I can survive just about anything. He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound filled the unfinished room like light through a window. By fall, the house was finished enough to move into. Not completely done. There were still rooms that needed painting, details that needed finishing, but livable. They moved their belongings from the cabin. Over the course of a week, and with each trip, Emma felt the shift from temporary to permanent. Settling deeper. The night they spent their first evening in the new house, they sat in the kitchen, the actual finished kitchen, with its big window and built-in shelves, and ate dinner at a table that was not scarred and wobbly. Feels different, Caleb said. Looking around. Good different or bad different? Just different. He met her eyes across the table. The cabin was where I survived. This is where we live. It was true. The cabin had been about endurance, about making it through one day and then another. This house was about building a life with intention, about choosing what came next instead of just reacting to what happened. That night, Emma stood at her bedroom window, a real bedroom on the ground floor with space for more than just a bed, and looked out at the valley. The cabin was still visible in the distance, small and solid, a reminder of where they had started. But this house, this space they had built together, that was about where they were going. A knock on her door. Caleb stood in the hallway looking uncertain. I just wanted to make sure you had everything you needed, he said. I do, thank you. He nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. Emma, I know we have been careful about keeping things separate, but I want you to know if you ever wanted to change that. If you ever wanted this to be more than just partnership, I would like that. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Emma thought about all the months of careful distance, of respecting boundaries, of building trust slowly. Thought about the way her heart had started doing that strange thing more often. The way she would catch herself watching him work and feeling something warm spread through her chest. Thought about the difference between needing someone and choosing them. I would like that too, she said quietly. But I need time to be sure, to trust that this is real and not just convenience or gratitude or proximity. Caleb finished her thought. I know. Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere. Winter came again, their second winter, and this time Emma was ready for it. The house held warm and tight, every room heated by the central stove that Caleb had designed himself. She had filled her sewing room with work. The ready-made dresses had been so successful that Mrs. Chen had asked for more, plus custom orders from women who wanted something specific. Emma worked through the dark months, her hands never idle, her mind focused on creating things that would last. And in the evenings, she and Caleb would sit in the main room, him reading or working on ranch accounts, her sewing or mending, and they would talk about everything and nothing, about plans for spring and memories of the past, about the life they were building piece by careful piece. One night in late January, almost a year and a half after their wedding, Caleb set down his book and said, "I love you." The words landed soft but solid. Emma's hand stilled on her sewing. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the truth of it in his face. Not the desperate need of her first husband, not the transactional affection of convenience, but something steady and earned and raw. "I know," she said. "I have known for a while and I am terrified." The admission came easier than she had expected, because loving someone meant giving them power to hurt you. "My first husband used that power to destroy me slowly, one drink at a time, and I swore I would never give anyone that kind of power again. I know, and I cannot promise I will not hurt you. People hurt each other even when they do not mean to." Caleb leaned forward. "But I can promise I will try not to, and I can promise that if I do, it will not be because I do not value what we have." Emma set down her sewing, stood up, crossed the room to where he sat. She looked down at him. This man who had offered her shelter when she had nothing, who had lied to her and then proven himself through honesty, who had built a house with her input and supported her work without question. "I love you too," she said. "I did not want to, did not plan to, but somewhere between mending your fence and designing this house and watching you try to figure out how to be married to someone who actually talks back, I fell in love with you." He stood, and they were face to face now, close enough that she could see the relief and joy warring in his expression. "So what do we do now?" he asked. "We keep building, keep being honest, keep choosing each other." She reached for his hand. "And maybe we stop pretending this is just an arrangement." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like he was afraid she might break. She kissed him back harder, showing him she was not fragile, that she had survived too much to break now. When they pulled apart, Caleb was smiling in a way she had never seen before, open, unguarded, completely present. "Should we?" He gestured vaguely toward the bedroom. Yes, but slowly. I need to get used to this being real. Slowly is fine, we have got time." And they did. All the time in the world, stretching out ahead of them, like the valley stretching toward the mountains. Spring brought the first real test of their expanded operation. Caleb hired new hands, doubled the size of the herd, and suddenly the quiet ranch was full of people and noise and the organized chaos of running a real business. Emma found herself cooking for crews, managing supplies, solving problems she had never imagined would be hers to solve. It was exhausting. It was overwhelming. It was exactly what she had needed. One afternoon, she was in town delivering finished dresses to Mrs. Chen when Jack Thornton walked into the store. They had not spoken since that day at the train platform, and for a moment Emma considered just ignoring him. But then she thought about who she had been that day, desperate, alone, willing to accept dismissal as truth, and who she was now. The difference was worth acknowledging. "Mr. Thornton," she said. He stopped, looked at her, and something that might have been shame crossed his face. "Mrs. Boone." He removed his hat. "I heard you and Caleb are doing well." "We are. I am glad." He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "I have thought about that day, about what I said to you. I was not kind." "No, you were not. I told myself I was being practical, honest, that you would not have survived life on my ranch." He looked down at his hat. "But the truth is, I was afraid of what people would say about me marrying someone like you, someone who did not fit their idea of what a rancher's wife should be. And now I realize I let other people's opinions cost me the chance to know someone who might have been worth knowing." He met her eyes. "You have built something here, something real, and I was too blind to see you had that in you." Emma could have been gracious, could have accepted the apology, and moved on. But there was a part of her, the part that had stood on that platform feeling like she was not enough, that needed him to understand. The thing is, Mr. Thornton, I would have survived your ranch. I would have worked hard. Learned what I needed to learn, and made it work because that is what I do. What I would not have survived was being married to someone who saw me as a mistake he had to manage instead of a person he chose. She picked up her delivery of dresses. So actually, you rejecting me was the best thing that could have happened. It led me to someone who sees me as an equal instead of a burden. She walked out before he could respond, her heart pounding but her steps steady. Mrs. Chen was waiting outside, having clearly eavesdropped on the whole conversation. That felt good, did not it? Mrs. Chen asked. It really did. Good. He needed to hear it. Mrs. Chen walked with her back to the wagon. You know what I am most proud of? You did not need him to apologize. You have built a life that has nothing to do with his opinion of you. That is real power. By their second anniversary, the ranch was thriving. The expanded operation had paid off. The cattle prices were good, and Caleb's reputation as a fair employer meant he never lacked for workers when he needed them. Emma's sewing business had grown too. She now employed 2 other women to help with the simpler work, keeping the complex pieces for herself. They celebrated quietly, just the 2 of them, with a dinner Emma had spent all day preparing, and wine Caleb had ordered specially from San Francisco. 2 years, Caleb said, raising his glass. Not bad for an arrangement that was supposed to be temporary. Not bad at all. Emma clinked her glass against his. Think we can make it to 3? I think we can make it as long as we want. He reached across the table, took her hand. I know this was not what either of us planned, but I cannot imagine my life without you in it now. Even when I argue with you about fence placement, especially then. You are usually right anyway. They laughed, and the sound filled the house they had built together, the life they had created from rejection and necessity, and the slow, steady work of choosing each other every day. That night, lying in bed, their bed now, in the room they shared, Emma thought about the journey that had brought her here, the train platform where she had been dismissed, the general store where she had found refuge, the cabin where she had learned to survive, the house where she had learned to thrive. She had been told she was too small, too weak, too old, too much, not enough. But she had proven them wrong by the simple act of refusing to accept their assessment as truth, by working, building, claiming space for herself in a world that had tried to deny her one, by choosing partnership over romance, honesty over comfort, reality over fairy tales. What are you thinking about? Caleb asked in the darkness. How strange life is. How I came here expecting one thing and found something completely different. Better or worse. Different. Better in some ways. Harder in others. She turned to face him. But mine. That is what matters. It is mine by choice, not circumstance. Ours, he corrected gently. It is ours. And lying there in the dark, in the house they had built, in the life they had created, Emma finally believed it. Not because she had to, not because she needed to, but because it was true. They were partners, equals, 2 people who had started as strangers and become something neither of them had expected, but both of them had needed. The woman who had been rejected as too small had built something larger than the man who dismissed her could ever imagine. Not through defiance, not through revenge, but through the quiet, persistent work of proving that worth was not measured in inches or years or other people's expectations. It was measured in choices, in the courage to stand, in the strength to build instead of accept, in the wisdom to know that sometimes the best thing that can happen is being told no by someone who does not deserve your yes. And in the end, that made all the difference.